Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Maria Luisa Cedeno. On July 18, 2020, Maria Luisa Cedeno arrived at the Lamb Mission Inn Hotel in Manuel Antonio, in the Costa Rican province of Puntarenas. She was traveling with her little dog named Mafalda, it she treated like a daughter. The first day passed without incident. Maria Luisa went to the beach, had lunch at a restaurant, and drank some alcohol, activities common for tourists. However, the following day, everything changed. At 4:30 p.m. sharp, Maria requested that a bottle of wine, mineral water, and 2 glasses be brought to her room. It's worth noting that she didn't mention being with anyone, and everyone around her was convinced that she wanted to rest alone. Throughout the entire afternoon and night, no movement was recorded in her room. On July 20th, the hotel staff tried to contact her, but they received no response. A staff member had previously spoken with Maria, who mentioned that she lived alone because she had recently separated from her boyfriend, was not feeling well, and was only traveling with her small dog, Mafalda. Since several months had passed since the official start of the pandemic, Maria said that this had also affected her mental health, which was deteriorating. Considering everything she had been through, she said she needed a vacation. Therefore, the hotel staff decided to enter the room to check regularly, in case of any unforeseen circumstances. The front door was locked from the inside, so they looked for another way in and checked the door leading to the patio. This room had an emergency exit for guests with pets. They had previously opened the patio door so the dog could go outside. When the staff approached this exit, they found the door half open. Upon entering, they were hit by a terrible odor and saw blood stains throughout the room. The dog was alive, trembling in a corner and avoiding the staff, likely due to trauma or fear. The lifeless body of Maria was found lying motionless on the bed, wrapped in a sheet. Maria Luisa Cedeno was a highly respected anesthesiologist. At 43, she led the Department of Anesthesiology and Rehabilitation at SEMA Hospital in Escazú. Her colleagues admired her greatly, and during the early pandemic, she was notably committed to helping patients in need. As a medical professional, she provided significant support to her loved ones, arranging health insurance, assisting with medical appointments. Maria's parents lived in San Carlos, which made it difficult for her to be with her family all the time. Friends described her as a strong, intelligent, and likable woman who loved traveling both within Costa Rica and internationally. Her reputation was impeccable. The news of Maria's death was a tremendous shock to her family and Costa Rica. People were left asking, who would want to harm someone like Maria? From the moment the hotel staff discovered the lifeless Maria body, the mysteries of this case began. The crime scene is confusing, not only because of the brutality Maria endured, but also because of the mysteries that arise as soon as they enter the hotel room she rented. Like most hotels worldwide, this hotel keeps a record of the magnetic keys used for the rooms. This means that each time a room is accessed, the card used is recorded, and the key's code is identified. This system allows they to determine whether the person accessing the room was a guest or a hotel employee. In Maria's murder, there was no record of any other keys being used other than hers. Maria had entered her room alone the previous night, with no one else entering through the main door. However, the room had a sliding glass door at the back that could be used as an alternative entry point. Since this door could only be locked from the inside, it is possible that Maria left the door unlocked, either intentionally letting someone in or accidentally leaving the door open. This allowed someone to enter and commit the murder. As the door didn't have an electronic lock system, there was no record of anyone entering or exiting through it. This was considered the most logical explanation at the time. After discovering Maria's body, hotel staff immediately contacted the police. Upon examining the scene, it was clear that she had been brutally murdered. Her body showed severe damage, indicating that she had been tortured by someone who was extremely enraged. Forensic experts collected evidence and analyzed every detail to determine the cause of death and identify the perpetrator. The authorities recommended a closed casket at the funeral due to the extreme level of brutality inflicted upon Maria. An autopsy was later performed, which showed that the body had multiple bite marks and 2 broken fingernails, indicating that Maria attempted to defend herself. The autopsy also revealed that the killer cleaned the she-body after the murder. According to the investigator, Maria was killed in the bedroom, as evidenced by the large amount of blood found on the bed. The killer then moved the body to the bathroom, washed and dried it, wrapped it in a sheet, and placed it back on the bed. Although the killer attempted to wash the Maria body to eliminate evidence, this proved nearly impossible due to the extensive presence of blood throughout the room. Blood stains were found on the floor, walls, curtains, and bed, indicating the brutality of the attack. The forensic experts took photographs and collected as much physical evidence as possible from the scene. The body was then sent for an autopsy, and the police started interviewing the hotel staff and guests who may have witnessed or heard something. Given the state of the crime scene, it is likely that Maria screamed violently and her dog barked loudly during the attack. However, no one reported hearing any screams throughout the night. The hotel was relatively empty, but there were still a few people working at the hotel, and the hotel owner, Harry Bowden, who lived there with his husband Dano, were also present there. Additionally, Harry had allowed some acquaintances to stay at the hotel due to their financial difficulties. A bottle of wine and 2 glasses were found in Maria's hotel room. The wine had been ordered from room service. Later, investigators examined Maria's cell phone and found that she had sent a photo of the 2 glasses to a friend. However, the message did not indicate that she was with someone or she was waiting for someone to come to her room. She also sent an audio message to the same friend describing the hotel's all-inclusive package and its benefits. Maria seemed pleased with the service, mentioning that staff would bring her drinks, fruit, and other treats. She also mentioned interacting with hotel staff, including the bartender and hotelier's assistant, and noted that the owner was Dutch. Although she acknowledged the hotel is a bit worn out and understaffed, she expressed her overall satisfaction with her stay. The room cost 155,000 colons per night. Authorities investigating Maria's murder spoke with her friends and relatives to identify suspect. They discovered that she often ordered 2 glasses, even when alone, to have 1 for alcohol and 1 for water. This suggested she wasn't waiting for anyone at the time of the attack. The investigation revisited the initial theory: the attacker must have been someone who saw Maria in the hotel, noticed the back door was open and attacked her. However, the extreme brutality of the crime suggests that the killer had deep hatred and anger towards the victim, and often the killer knew the victim. Even so, there is no evidence that Maria was with anyone or had enemies at the time of her death. The autopsy revealed additional details about Maria's death, including signs of strangulation, blows to her face, arms, and chest, and evidence of abuse. After analyzing the autopsy results, conducting interviews with family, friends, and hotel staff, authorities concluded that the attack was likely carried out by multiple individuals. This theory was based on the fact that there were no reports of Maria screaming during the attack. Authorities believed that at least 2 attackers were involved, and they took complete control of Maria. Some investigators even suggested that a 3rd person may have been involved, as the victim showed signs of abuse. According to this theory, 2 assailants held Maria Luisa down and a 3rd raped her. All of this is evidenced by the fact that when her body was analyzed, there was no sign of rope or anything to indicate that she was tied up. Police speculated that the men may have stuffed something into Maria's mouth to stop her from screaming or to prevent her screams from being heard, in order to carry out the attack undetected. The cause of death was determined to be a head injury, which could have occurred in several ways. It might have been caused by a violent blow to the head, by being undressed, as there was evidence of fractured vertebrae, or by being hit with an object or falling heavily to the floor. Overall, what the assailants did to Maria was an atrocity, and without clear motivation. The first suspect was quickly identified because this man, who was staying at the hotel, had numerous fresh wounds resembling scratches and blows, suggesting he had been defending himself. Upon investigation, it was revealed to be Teodoro Herrera Martinez, an exotic dancer working in the city's nightclubs and staying at the hotel at the time of the murder. Teodoro was arrested when authorities were looking for evidence that he was involved in the murder. The man's footprints were compared to those at the crime scene. 2 matching prints were found on the black ceramic tile floor in front of the bed in the bedroom. A short time later, a second suspect named Luis Carlos Miranda was arrested. A hotel security guard had seen him walking in the hallways at night with Teodoro. Because Torreira was already in custody, Luis needed to be questioned to check for any links to the case. Additionally, tests revealed that his dental records matched the bite marks on Maria's body. Hotel employees testified that they saw Maria talking to Luis and, on one occasion, to Teodoro. However, their interactions were casual, like simple greetings, rather than those of acquaintances or friends. This might be because there were very few guests at the hotel, so they may have passed each other many times. Earlier, the hotel owner allowed 2 friends, Luis and Teodoro, to stay on the property due to financial difficulties. The police decided to question the owner of the hotel, Harry Bowden, after finding matching footprints and bite marks from the 2 suspects, Luis and Teodoro. During questioning, Harry revealed that on the night of the murder, July 19, 2020, he and husband were having dinner in their apartment within the hotel with Luis and Teodoro. After dinner, the 4 men went to a private pool. Harry also disclosed that Luis and Teodoro worked for him in exchange for accommodation. Luis managed the website and marketing, while Teodoro worked as a cook and bartender. The hotel owners and Luis and Teodoro were not close friends initially, but after moving into the hotel a year before the murder, they started spending more time together, going out for meals and socializing. And thus, the 4 men became friends. Although Harry cooperated by giving an interview in August 2020, but he was arrested because bite marks found on Maria's body matched his dental records, which began to reveal the truth. The police confiscated the phones of all the detainees and found text messages between Luis and Harry that turned out to be very compromising. In these messages, Luis invited Harry to have an intimate relationship with a woman he had been following. This exchange happened several days before the incident. However, Luis and Harry claimed that the messages didn't mean anything and that they were just joking, but that, along with the physical evidence, was enough for the authorities to keep them in jail while the case was being put together. The only person not arrested was Harry's husband. Because there was no evidence against him, no text messages, no fingerprints, and the bite marks didn't match those on Maria's body. Luis, Harry, and Teodoro's defense argued that the bite mark evidence was inconclusive and that none of them were involved in the murder. Despite this, the 3 men were charged with the murder of Maria. Before the trial, Harry's lawyer requested that he be released and placed under house arrest for 2 reasons. First, due to Harry being 69 years old, staying in jail was risky. Second, he had difficulty walking due to recent knee surgery. The defense claimed he had been using a cane for a long time, and at the trial's start, he appeared in a wheelchair. Because of this request, he was placed under house arrest and returned to the hotel where he was staying, and he couldn't leave the hotel. On September 13, 2022, the trial of Luis, Harry, and Teodoro began, where evidence against them was presented. The prosecution struggled to prove the involvement of Harry and Luis. They had text messages and bite marks on Maria's body as evidence. However, the bite marks couldn't definitively identify the murderer, they could only exclude suspects. All hotel employees were ruled out as suspects, but not these two, Harry and Luis. In contrast, Teodoro had the most evidence against him. There was a blood trail, and he had wounds inflicted by Maria during her self-defense, as his blood was found under her fingernails. Blood was also found on his shoes, watch, and cell phone, located in his room during the search. Given this evidence, only Teodoro Herrera Martinez was convicted and sentenced to 50 years in prison, while Harry Bowden and Luis Carlos Miranda were acquitted due to a lack of physical evidence. Many people believe that Luis and Harry were involved in the murder because the hotel security cameras mysteriously stopped working on the day it happened. This suggests that someone might have planned it. A hotel security guard was also suspected, but he and the other two individuals could not be arrested due to a lack of evidence. Strangely, the guard left for another country after the murder, even though the police asked him to attend the trial as a witness. There are several aspects of this case that suggest more people might be involved. For example, two guests told the police that the hotel experienced a power outage for many hours on the night of the murder, which may have been intentional. This could have been done to disable the security cameras and the magnetic keys. A peculiar detail is that 9 days after the murder, investigators searched Harry's private office, which may have given him enough time to destroy any evidence. They not only analyzed text messages but also looked at Luis and Harry's social media accounts, where they discovered discussions about an idea directly related to how to find Maria's body. Legally, Harry and Luis are presumed innocent. The only person in prison for this murder is Teodoro Herrera Martinez, who is awaiting a new trial to see if his sentence can be reduced. Although the case is solved, but the Maria family suspects something is being hidden. They suspect a defense or cover-up. The family reported that the authorities returned Maria's belongings soaked in blood, which they find puzzling because they wanted to preserve the evidence in case new information emerged. They are satisfied with Teodoro's conviction but not with the acquittal of Harry and Luis. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Donald Harvey. Donald Harvey was born on April 15, 1952, in Hamilton, Ohio, to Ray and Goldie Donald. He was the oldest of 3 children and was affectionately known as Donnie by his parents. Following his birth, the family relocated to Boonville, Kentucky, a small community in the Appalachian Mountains. Despite struggling with poverty, they was loving and nurturing to their children. However, their marriage began to deteriorate due to their economic struggles. As a child, Donald was quiet and mostly kept to himself, showing no apparent signs of abnormality. However, he suffered a traumatic past, being sexually abused and assaulted by at least 3 men. The perpetrators included his uncle on his mother's side, who molested him during visits to his grandmother's home, and an older neighbor who offered him money for sexual favors. Additionally, at the age of 18, Donald claimed to have been sexually assaulted by his roommate, Randy White. While a traumatic past can contribute to the development of psychological issues, Donald was often perceived as a loner in school. He preferred to focus on his studies and rarely participated in extracurricular activities, opting to read instead. Although this helped him earn good grades, it also led to teasing and the label of teacher's pet. After graduating from Sturgeon Elementary School, Donald enrolled in Boonville High School in 1968. Despite his good academic record, he soon found himself bored with the daily routine and decided to drop out. However, he eventually earned his diploma through a correspondence school in Chicago and received his general education development at the age of 16. With no clear future plans, Donald struggled to figure out his life's direction. He eventually moved to Cincinnati, Ohio, where he landed a job at a local factory. However, when the factory closed down in 1970, Donald lost his job and was left uncertain about his future. Around that time, his mother called and asked him to visit his ailing grandfather, who was in Marymount Hospital in London, Kentucky. Donald agreed to the visit. During his daily visits to see his ailing grandfather, Donald formed strong relationships with the hospital workers, who grew to genuinely like him. Their admiration for him led to an unexpected job offer. Although it is unclear what motivated Donald to want to work as a nurse's aide, some speculate that he needed to earn a living after losing his previous job. Despite lacking formal training in nursing or medicine, the hospital staff entrusted him with responsibilities. Donald's job at the hospital involved caring for patients on his own, including tasks like changing bedpans, inserting catheters, and giving medications. Despite the challenges, Donald's early weeks at the hospital passed without incident. However, on the evening of May 31, 1970, Donald was attending to 88-year-old stroke patient Logan Evans in a private room. Suddenly, Evans rubbed his own feces on Donald's face. While it's likely Evans wasn't fully aware of his actions due to the effects of his stroke, the incident triggered something within Donald, leading him to completely lose control. Without realizing what he was doing, Donald suffocated Evans with a blue plastic bag and a pillow until the patient was motionless. He then checked Evans' pulse with a stethoscope to confirm his death. Following the killing, Donald disposed of the plastic bag, cleaned Evans' body, dressed him in a fresh gown, and showered him before notifying the nurses about the patient's passing. After the first incident, no one suspected anything out of the ordinary. Donald went to cover the patient with a sheet, but instead, he used his hand to smother him to death. It was surprising that he was able to do this without anyone noticing, especially since he used a pillow to kill him. The next day, Donald was assigned to care for another elderly patient, 69-year-old James Tyree. He made a critical mistake by using the wrong size catheter on him. When James realized what was happening, he yelled at Donald to remove it. Donald used his hand to restrain him, which caused him to vomit blood and eventually die from an air embolism. Once again, no one suspected foul play. With no one suspecting him of any wrongdoing after his first two murders, he became more confident and careless. Just 3 weeks after the first murder, Donald deliberately cut off the oxygen tank of 42-year-old patient Elizabeth Wyatt. He later claimed that he had ended her suffering, as she had expressed a desire to die. A nurse found Elizabeth dead 4 hours later, but no one questioned Donald about her death. Over the next 10 months, he took advantage of the lack of suspicion and killed 15 more patients under his care. He saw this as an opportunity to indulge his darker impulses, and he continued to kill without being detected. Donald's methods of murder varied widely, driven by a desire for pleasure or experimentation. He would often use smothering, sabotage oxygen tanks, inject lethal drugs, or overdose patients with medication. When angered, his methods became even more brutal. On one occasion, he inserted a coat hanger through a patient's catheter after an argument, puncturing the patient's bladder and bowel, which led to infection and death a few days later. Despite the brutality of his actions, Donald considered himself a mercy killer, the self-proclaimed angel of death who was playing God with vulnerable patients. He cloaked his horrific deeds in a mask of kindness, believing that his actions were somehow merciful. On March 31, 1971, the day he was arrested for burglary while drunk, Donald's life took a turn. In his incoherent confession, he revealed his dark secret to the police, but no one took him seriously. As a result, he faced only charges of petty theft and paid a fine instead of serving prison time. This close call prompted Donald to attempt to turn his life around. For a few months, he tried to regain stability and eventually landed a part-time job as a nurse's aide at Cardinal Hill Hospital in Lexington. In June 1973, Donald started a second nursing job at Good Samaritan Hospital in Lexington. He held both nursing positions simultaneously before eventually moving on. Between August 1974 and September 1975, he took on two non-nursing roles, a telephone operator in Lexington and a clerk at St. Luke's Hospital in Fort Thomas, Kentucky. Notably, Donald was able to resist his urge to kill during this period. A possible explanation is that he had limited access to patients in these new roles, which may have also contributed to his decision to change jobs frequently. Donald's struggle to control his killing urges eventually became too much to manage, leading him to relocate to Cincinnati, Ohio in September 1975. He found employment at the Cincinnati VA Medical Hospital, working various roles including nursing assistant, housekeeping aide, and autopsy assistant. The hospital's night shift schedule and lack of supervision gave him unrestricted access to all areas of the hospital. Over the next decade, Donald murdered at least 15 patients while working at the hospital. He meticulously documented each crime in a diary, detailing the methods he used to kill his victims. These methods included poisoning patients' food and drinks, suffocating them with plastic bags and towels, and injecting them with lethal substances. Donald's experimentation with different methods was influenced by his study of medical journals, which he used to refine his techniques and avoid detection. Donald preferred cyanide as his method of murder, which he mixed into patients' food or administered through their gastric tubes. He accumulated a large stash of cyanide, approximately 30 pounds, which he stole from the hospital over time and kept at home for safekeeping. He stated that he began using morphine to kill patients in the 1970s, particularly in small hospitals in Kentucky where it was not heavily regulated. He also mentioned he used other methods, such as cyanide, arsenic, adhesive cleaner, and suffocation with a plastic bag. Despite the numerous deaths, he claimed to have avoided suspicion by making them appear accidental or due to natural causes. He revealed that in reality, he was a serial killer hiding in plain sight, preying on vulnerable patients. He took it upon himself to decide who lived or died, often without the patients' or their families' consent. He justified his actions as merciful, but he acknowledged that the truth was more complex. While he claimed that his crimes were motivated by compassion, other evidence suggested otherwise. He recounted that a turning point came in the early 1980s when his behavior became more erratic and driven by rage. He started dating a man named Doug Hill, but their relationship was tumultuous. After a heated argument, he poisoned Doug's ice cream with arsenic, and fortunately, Doug survived. This incident marked the first time he tried to harm someone outside of the hospital, revealing a darker side to his nature. Donald's behavior took a dark turn after a fight with Carl Heller. He moved in with Carl Heller, but the relationship quickly became toxic. Donald's jealousy and paranoia led him to suspect Heller of cheating, and he started lacing Carl's food with arsenic to keep her from leaving. As time passed, Donald's cruel actions extended beyond his home. He poisoned a female neighbor's drink with hepatitis serum during an argument, and she almost died before receiving treatment. Unfortunately, another neighbor, Helen Metzger, was not as fortunate. Donald poisoned one of her pies with arsenic, which ultimately led to her death. Donald's lack of consequences for his crimes emboldened him, and he became more confident and reckless. He felt like he was above the law, having gotten away with multiple murders. In April 1983, Donald's behavior escalated. After a disagreement with Heller's parents, he began secretly poisoning their food with small doses of arsenic. The following month, Carl's father, Henry, suffered a stroke and was hospitalized. During a visit, Donald saw an opportunity to strike again and laced Henry's pudding with arsenic. Henry died that night. Over the next year, Donald continued to target Carl's mother, Margaret, periodically poisoning her in an attempt to kill her. In January 1984, Donald's relationship with his partner, Carl, ended, and he was asked to leave their home. Donald reacted poorly to the breakup and spent the next 2 years trying to harm Carl using poison. He also attempted to kill one of Carl's female friends in a separate incident, but was unsuccessful. Although Donald did manage to hospitalize Carl at one point, his attempts to kill her ultimately failed. Donald's behavior raised suspicions on July 18, 1985, when security guards at his workplace discovered a suspicious collection of items in his gym bag. The contents included a gun, hypodermic needles, surgical scissors, gloves, a cocaine spoon, medical texts, occult books, and a biography of serial killer Charles Sawbridge. As a result of the discovery, Donald was fined $50 for carrying a firearm on federal property and given the option to resign from his job quietly. Surprisingly, the incident was not documented in his work record, and the hospital did not investigate Donald for potential involvement in other crimes during his employment. He was able to secure a new job as a part-time nurse's aide at Drake Memorial Hospital in Cincinnati just 7 months later, in February 1986. Donald Harvey's new employers were impressed by his work and soon offered him a full-time position at the hospital. Unbeknownst to them, Donald had a dark past, and he quickly fell back into his old routine. Over the next 13 months, he murdered 26 more patients and attempted to kill several others by tampering with their life support machines, injecting them with lethal substances, and suffocating them. The murder spree finally came to an end on March 7, 1987, with the death of 44-year-old John Powell. Powell had been recovering from a motorcycle accident, but his sudden and mysterious death raised suspicions. Due to Ohio's law requiring an autopsy in cases of vehicular homicide, the authorities were able to investigate Powell's death. During the autopsy, the assistant coroner detected a faint scent of almonds, a sign of cyanide poisoning. This discovery led the authorities to launch an investigation into Powell's death. Initially, they suspected Powell's friends and family, but they found no evidence or motive. The focus then shifted to hospital employees who had access to Powell's room, and Donald Harvey was one of the individuals they needed to rule out. Hospital employees were voluntarily taking polygraph tests to clear their names. Donald Harvey also was offered to take a test, but he didn't follow through. Instead, he called in sick on the day of his scheduled test. He had even purchased a book on how to cheat on lie detector tests. This raised suspicions, especially when investigators discovered his notorious nickname, Angel of Death, and learned about his questionable partner from the hospital. As the investigation continued, authorities focused on Donald due to the unusual number of deaths surrounding him. During questioning, Donald initially denied any involvement in John Powell's murder, claiming he was just a victim of circumstance. However, after hours of interrogation, he eventually confessed to putting cyanide in Powell's feeding tube. He claimed he did it out of sympathy for Powell and his family, but denied responsibility for the other suspicious deaths. Donald was taken into custody, and investigators began searching for more evidence. On August 11, 1987, Donald, then 35, confessed to committing 33 murders over the past 17 years. As the investigation continued, the number of murders he confessed to grew to 70. Donald's claims of multiple murders raised suspicions among investigators, who questioned the accuracy of the numbers he provided. To verify his credibility, they ordered a series of psychiatric evaluations by multiple experts. The tests concluded that Donald was sane and competent, able to distinguish right from wrong and conform to the law. In 1987, Donald was sentenced to 8 life terms plus 20 years for the murders committed at Mary's Mount Hospital. The following year, he pleaded guilty to 3 additional murders and 3 attempted murders in Cincinnati, receiving 3 life sentences and 3 terms of 7 to 25 years. After a 2-year investigation, The remaining cases were closed due to insufficient evidence linking Donald to the crimes. The public was both shocked by Donald's actions, and many wondered what drove him to commit such heinous crimes. In a 1991 interview with the Columbus Dispatch, Donald revealed that his motivation stemmed from a desire for control. He felt that others had controlled him for 18 years, and he sought to reclaim power over his own life. Donald admitted that he enjoyed the sense of power that came with deciding who lived or died. Donald Harvey is one of the most notorious serial killers in U.S. history, not only due to the high number of victims but also because he targeted people he knew personally, including his patients. An Associated Press article from 2001 listed him as the worst serial killer in the United States. Contrary to expectations that Donald would spend the rest of his life in prison and die of natural causes, his life took a different turn. On March 28, 2017, Donald was found severely beaten in his cell at the Toledo Correctional Institution, where he was being held in protective custody. He died 2 days later from severe head injuries. Months later, an inmate named James Elliott confessed to the crime in a letter to the Toledo Blade. James, who was serving a 37-year sentence for multiple burglaries, claimed that he had committed the murder to bring closure to the families of Donald's victims, who were from his hometown in Kentucky. In his letter, James wrote that he hoped his actions would bring some solace to the victims' families, as Donald had not received the punishment he deserved from the courts. In September 2019, James was sentenced to life in prison after pleading guilty to the murder of the notorious Angel of Death. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Michelle Hadley. Michelle Hadley was born on December 20th, 1986 in Upland, California. Michelle was the eldest daughter of her parents, who were business owners. She grew up with a sister who's 3 years younger than her. Michelle was raised in a strict conservative home and shared a close relationship with her parents. Growing up, she had a pretty normal life. During her time at school and college, her friends knew her as a polite and kind person. Michelle was known for speaking her mind and addressing conflicts directly. Since childhood, she had been diligent in completing tasks, a trait that continued throughout her high school years. In high school, Michelle was in a long-term relationship with a single person whose identity remains unknown. The relationship led to marriage in 2008, but 4 years later, the marriage began to unravel. They decided to separate, which left Michelle heartbroken and questioning her ability to find love again. However, in 2013, she met Ian Diaz, a man she met through a dating site. Ian, who was working as a deputy U.S. Marshal at the time, was attentive and loving, drawing Michelle in. They eventually moved in together in the fall of 2014. Ian proposed to Michelle, and they set a wedding date. Initially, their marriage seemed perfect, but over time, Ian's behavior changed dramatically. Michelle had always seen Ian as a kind and attentive partner, but he slowly became loathing and abusive. At first, Michelle struggled to recognize these changes, mistaking them for acts of love. Ian began making requests that made Michelle uncomfortable, such as asking her to wear more revealing clothes. Despite her conservative upbringing, Michelle complied with his demands. Too easily, Ian made increasingly provocative demands. He asked her to get her navel pierced, and she finally agreed. Ian's requests became more bizarre and controlling. He asked Michelle to quit her job at a marketing firm, which she loved, and take a job at Disneyland, a place he had worked at before becoming a deputy U.S. Marshal. Ian claimed he wanted Michelle to be in a safer environment, but in reality, he wanted to keep a close eye on her every move, using his connections at Disneyland to monitor her activities. Michelle was initially taken aback by her husband's unusual request, but she wanted to make him happy, so she agreed to go along with it. However, as time passed, Michelle began to feel uneasy about the situation and realized she was changing into someone she wasn't. She thought about discussing her concerns with her husband, but when she tried to talk to him, he became defensive and abusive. Around this time, Michelle and her husband, Ian, decided to buy a condo together. They thought owning a place would strengthen their relationship. This was about 2 years after they met in 2015. After searching, they found a condo in downtown Anaheim that they loved, but it was a bit pricey at $470,000. Although it was a stretch for their budget, they wanted the condo. What Michelle didn't know at the time was that Ian had no intention of contributing to the mortgage payments. Michelle and Ian had been experiencing relationship problems, but things took a turn for the worse when they bought a condo together. Ian claimed he was having financial difficulties and couldn't contribute to the down payment, which was $144,000 in cash. Michelle paid the entire amount and also made the mortgage payments, despite both their names being on the deed. Their relationship continued to deteriorate, and one incident turned violent, with Ian raising his hand to Michelle, causing her slight injuries. She drafted an email to her sister about the abuse but never sent it. By the summer of 2015, Michelle decided to leave the condo and move in with her parents. However, she was still responsible for paying the mortgage, which Ian continued to neglect. This enraged Michelle, especially since she had left her high-paying job and was working at Disneyland for less pay. When Michelle tried to contact Ian about the missed mortgage payments, he ignored her emails, calls, and texts. This lack of response pushed Michelle to her limit, and she decided to confront Ian directly. Ian revealed that he had no intention of paying the mortgage on the condo he shared with Michelle. This admission enraged Michelle, who was already struggling with the situation. She sent Ian a strongly worded email, warning him that his behavior would have serious consequences. Ian responded by filing a restraining order against Michelle, but the police did not fully support his claim, as he was also at fault. When Michelle discovered Ian's restraining order request, she countered with evidence that he had never paid the mortgage on their jointly owned condo. They eventually agreed to hire property lawyers to resolve the issue. The court ultimately ruled in Michelle's favor, ordering Ian to pay the outstanding mortgage balance and imposing an additional penalty if he failed to comply. Ian was upset by the judgment but was forced to abide by the court's decision. The dispute took a year to resolve, and by 2016, Michelle and Ian had separated for good. Michelle was finally free from the toxic relationship, while Ian was left. He was still living in the condo and paying the mortgage, which had taken a significant toll on him. In an effort to move on, Ian started using dating apps again, which is how he met Angela Connell. Although little is known about Angela, it is known that she was born in 1985 in Phoenix, Arizona, attended a Catholic high school, and graduated from Arizona State University in 2006. Ian and Angela met in January 2016, and their connection was immediate. Within a month, Ian proposed, and Angela moved into his condo. Everything seemed perfect for they. By May 2016, Angela was pregnant with twins, and Ian was overjoyed. However, their happiness was short-lived. Angela received an anonymous email that read, "You're not the right person for Ian." The message shook Angela, and she couldn't help but think of her ex, Jason Rayburn, with whom she had a tumultuous relationship before meeting Ian. But there was one problem: Angela had cut off all contact with Jason after their breakup, so it seemed impossible for him to know about her new relationship with Ian. The email's origin and intentions remained a mystery. Ian and Angela were still living in the condo that Michelle had purchased. One day, Ian brought up the topic of the condo in a conversation with Angela, and she suddenly realized that Michelle might be the one who had sent her an anonymous email. Shortly after, Angela started receiving more emails from 6 different accounts, all with the same message but worded differently. Curious about the sender's identity, Angela replied to one of the emails and asked who was behind them. To her surprise, the response claimed to be from Michelle. Angela told Michelle to stop contacting her, but the emails continued. The next few emails Angela received made her feel threatened and worried for her safety. Fearing for her life, Angela decided to take action and filed a restraining order against Michelle on June 1, 2016. In her statement to the police, Angela explained that Michelle's emails had filled her with fear and anxiety. She was afraid to leave her home because of the threats and was worried that she might be attacked and killed if she stepped outside. The court took Angela's concerns seriously and immediately granted the restraining order against Michelle. In June 2016, Michelle appeared to have moved on from her past relationship. One evening, she met a friend and was returning home when she was met by a team of police officers in her driveway. Michelle was taken aback but cooperated with the officers and was taken in for questioning regarding the restraining order. During the interrogation, Michelle was questioned about her connection to Angela and the threatening emails sent from her email address. Michelle claimed she had never heard of Angela and was unaware of the emails. She also stated that she believed she was being set up, as she had recently received alerts from Google and Microsoft indicating that her email address had been compromised. Specifically, her email address had been shut down, and she had been notified that it was being used as a recovery email for multiple unknown email accounts. Michelle suspected that her ex-husband might be impersonating her and had reported her concerns to the Anaheim Police Department. However, the police officers did not take her claims seriously. Despite Michelle's denials, she was served with a restraining order. Unbeknownst to Michelle, this was only the beginning of a more complex situation. Shortly after, Angela started receiving emails responding to a Craigslist ad that she had not posted. The ad contained details soliciting a sexual coercion fantasy, which shocked Angela. She realized that someone must have created an account in her name, as the emails contained her exact personal details, including her phone number, condo address, and the breed of her dog. The only people who knew her condo's exact address were Ian and Michelle. Angela's fear resurfaced as she pondered the idea that the Craigslist ad might not have been Ian's doing. She became terrified, unwilling to leave her house, knowing that the perpetrator was aware of her address. The feeling of being constantly watched and not knowing who was responsible made her extremely uneasy. Days after the incident, on June 24, 2016, Angela was attacked. She was left with a bruised neck, ripped clothes, and a head injury from being slammed against the wall. Despite her condition, Angela managed to call 911. When the police asked if she recognized her attacker, Angela identified the person as Michelle. The police decided to take a stronger approach with Michelle and arrested her, as they believed a restraining order was not enough to prevent her from harming Angela. While in jail, Michelle managed to inform her parents about her arrest. Her parents, who were from a conservative background and were successful business owners, took immediate action to handle the situation. Michelle's bail was set at $10,000, which her parents were able to pay, securing her release. After Michelle's release, Angela began receiving harassing emails again. Although it seemed unlikely, the emails were actually sent from Michelle's personal email address. This raised questions about Michelle's involvement in the harassment. In another incident on July 13th, Angela contacted 911 after seeing a man standing outside her condo. When the police arrived, the stranger claimed to be responding to a sexually explicit Craigslist ad posted in Angela's name. The police investigated the origin of the ad and found that it led back to Michelle. This discovery raised more questions. Was Michelle lying to the police, or was someone else using her name to post the ad? The day after Michelle's second arrest on July 14th, the police set her bail at a staggering $1 million, an amount her parents couldn't afford to pay. Michelle strongly denied sending the threatening emails and creating the Craigslist ads, and her parents believed her, knowing she wasn't capable of such behavior. They decided to hire a lawyer, suspecting that whoever was behind the threats could continue to have Michelle arrested. During Michelle's second stint in jail, the threats and emails targeting Angela stopped again. 3 months passed, and it seemed like the situation had finally calmed down for Angela. Meanwhile, Michelle's parents were working tirelessly to uncover the identity of the person impersonating their daughter. To get to the bottom of the mystery, they needed to find out who had access to Michelle's records. After gathering data from her school, hospital, and other records, they discovered crucial evidence. It turned out that Michelle had been hospitalized in June, on the same day the first emails were sent. This revelation made it clear that Michelle couldn't have sent those emails herself. Michelle's parents were given new hope when they received information that led them to believe their daughter was innocent. Michelle's father took matters into his own hands and downloaded software to track the IP addresses of the threatening emails, which were encrypted and difficult to trace. On September 30, 2016, Ian appeared at the police station and presented the bail, securing Michelle's release. Michelle and her family were shocked and confused by Ian's actions, and they couldn't understand why he would bail her out after treating her poorly in the past. They wondered if Ian had suddenly developed a conscience or if there was more to the story. After Michelle's release, Ian revealed a shocking truth. He claimed that Angela had framed Michelle for sending the threatening emails. According to Ian, Angela had created proxy email addresses in Michelle's name and used them to send threatening emails to herself. This revelation raised more questions than answers, and Michelle and her family were left to wonder why Angela would do such a thing. Angela went so far as to post Craigslist ads pretending to be Michelle. These ads included personal details that only Ian and Angela would know. Further, Angela inflicted bruises on herself in June 2016, claiming someone had attacked her in her garage. However, Ian later found CCTV footage revealing the truth: Angela had self-inflicted the injuries. Ian discovered a history of Angela fabricating stories and making things up from the start of their relationship. Angela's deceit went so far as faking her pregnancy. She had even purchased a sonogram photo and positive pregnancy test. Ian investigated further to determine the root cause of Angela's obsessive and hurtful actions against Michelle. Angela became aware of Michelle after meeting Ian in 2015, where Michelle and Ian came up frequently. As a result, Angela developed curiosity and eventually resentment toward Michelle after looking into Michelle's personal background, including the affluent community from which she hailed. Angela's discovery led her to view Michelle as a lucrative target. Meanwhile, Ian, Michelle's husband, harbored a deep-seated resentment towards Michelle due to a past condo dispute. The incident had left Ian fuming, particularly because he was forced to pay the mortgage after Michelle's countersuit. Seeking revenge, Ian and Angela formed an alliance to bring Michelle down. Ian provided Angela with Michelle's email address, and they began secretly plotting to frame Michelle and have her arrested. To conceal their scheme, they created multiple email addresses to communicate with each other. Using virtual private networks, VPNs, they created 6 fake accounts in Michelle's name. Unbeknownst to Michelle, these accounts were the source of the Google alerts she had reported to the police, which were actually created by Angela. When Michelle obtained a restraining order, Angela was dissatisfied, as her goal was to completely eliminate Michelle. In response, Angela devised a more elaborate plan. She created a fake Craigslist profile using Michelle's identity and posted an ad inviting men to her home for a sexual coercion fantasy. However, the inconsistencies in their plan ultimately led Ian to confess, inadvertently framing his own wife in the process. He was seemingly oblivious to the extent Angela would go far once the truth was out. The police obtained a search warrant for all of Angela's devices, and what they found was astonishing. The investigation revealed that all of Ian's claims were true. They discovered 21 threatening emails, most of which were sent from Angela and Ian's condo. Further investigation into the origins of the emails supposedly sent to Angela revealed that some were sent from Arizona. It was discovered that Angela had traveled to Arizona to visit her father during that time. The investigation into Angela's background began after these shocking discoveries. It was then that investigators found out that this was not the first time Angela had committed such an act. In 2013, Angela had committed similar crimes while dating Jason Rayburn, a state trooper from California. During their relationship, Angela claimed to be an attorney and said she had been diagnosed with cervical cancer. However, as time passed, Jason became suspicious as Angela's claims did not add up. He started digging deeper and was shocked to discover that Angela had fabricated both her cancer diagnosis and her career. On January 6, 2019, nearly 3 years after the truth came to light, Angela was arrested and charged for her crimes. The Orange County District Attorney's Office worked to clear Michelle's name, and 3 days later, her record was officially cleared of the false charges of making a threat to life and assault. As a result of the ordeal, Michelle had to drop out of her MBA program and lost her job. However, now that her name has been cleared, she is rebuilding her life. She has since completed her MBA and found a job in field marketing for a cosmetics company. Michelle has also moved to New York to start fresh and be closer to her sister. In contrast, Angela pleaded guilty to 10 felonies, including false imprisonment and perjury, and was sentenced to 5 years in prison. Ian, who was involved with Angela, has since separated from her and sold their condo for $500,000. In 2021, Ian faced multiple charges for allegedly masterminding a plot to frame Michelle. In addition to receiving a 5-year prison sentence, he was charged with 1 count each of perjury, cyberstalking, and conspiracy to commit cyberstalking. This raises questions about the thoroughness of the initial investigation. If the investigators and police officers had scrutinized the situation more closely, perhaps the plot would not have progressed as far as it did. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Leanne Tiernan. Leanne Tiernan was born on September 27, 1984, to Michael Tiernan and Sharon Hawkhead in Bramley. Although her parents divorced shortly after her birth, Leanne remained close to her father. She and her older sister, Michelle, lived with their mother in Leeds, but their father continued to play an active role in their lives. Leanne was also very fond of her grandparents and would often accompany them to church on Sunday mornings. She had a sweet tooth and was affectionately nicknamed Chocolate Chip Niece by an uncle. Leanne was a student at West Leeds High School. She had been diligently studying for her GCSEs. A day out with her best friend, 15-year-old Sarah Whitehouse, was a fun holiday. They planned to go to Leeds for some early Christmas shopping. On Sunday, November 26, 2000, after going to church with her grandmother, Leanne returned home to prepare for an outing with Sarah. She wears a black and white ribbed turtleneck sweater, black pants, and black ankle boots over a blue jacket. She styled her hair in her favorite French style, kissed her mother, and set off to meet Sarah. Leanne and Sarah took a bus to downtown Leeds and spent the afternoon shopping. By late afternoon, they finished their work and boarded the bus back to Bramley. At about 4:50 p.m., they got out of the car and walked to Sarah's house and parted ways. Sarah watched Leanne walk towards Holly Gill, a public footpath that was a shortcut to her house. Even though the path was unlit and went through a wooded area, Leanne felt safe walking because it was still light out. It should have only taken Leanne 20 minutes to get home, but when Sarah called Leanne's house at 5:20 p.m. to chat, she was surprised to hear that Leanne hadn't come home yet. Sharon kept calling Leanne's mobile phone, but she did not answer. At 7 p.m., Sharon reported Leanne missing to the local police station. West Yorkshire Police, led by Detective Superintendent Chris Gregg, launched a large-scale search operation. The terrain is challenging, with more than 700 homes, vacant lots, woods, canals, drainage shafts, and wells to search. The police are determined to find Leanne and bring her home safely. They used helicopters, uniformed police, and search dogs to scour the area, going from house to house. To preserve any potential evidence, trash collection in the area has been suspended. A week later, despite their best efforts, there was still no sign of Leanne. Investigators reconstructed her final activities with the help of her sister Michelle and close friend Sarah. As the investigation unfolded, several witnesses came forward claiming to have seen a suspicious man walking his black and tan dog in the Howley Gill area just an hour before Leanne got off the bus on her way home. The police created a composite sketch of the man, describing him as 5 feet 8 inches with a stocky build, round face, and possible scarring. He was seen wearing a black beanie, a long waterproof coat, and dirty jeans. Police have released this information to the public. As the investigation stalled, the case began to go cold. However, the public continues to show support for Leanne's family, doing everything they can to make her story known. Dad of 3 from Leeds, Sean Clark, even offered a £10,000 reward for any information that could lead to Leanne's safe return. Additionally, Iceland Foods, a supermarket chain, printed Leanne's picture and details on their milk cartons nationwide. As the months passed, investigators searched more than 2,000 homes and outbuildings along Leanne's route home from the shopping district. The police still haven't found Leanne. Her loved ones always hoped that one day she would return home. But 9 months after her disappearance, on August 20, 2001, a man named Mark Bisson was walking his dog in Lindley Woods, a forest near North Yorkshire, when he stumbled upon a mysterious discovery. Initially, it appeared to be a pile of rubbish, but as he looked closer, he discovered a floral duvet wrapped in twine. When removing the rope, Bisson found a body wrapped in 9 large garbage bags. The police were called, and they carefully removed the blanket and bag to reveal the body of a fully clothed young girl. The body was found with its hands bound behind its back with 3 yellow cable ties, and a leather dog collar was tightly secured around its neck. Underneath the black garbage bag covering its head, investigators discovered the decomposing face of a young woman. Using fingerprints, they were able to identify the body as Leanne Tiernan. An autopsy later confirmed that Leanne had been strangled to death with a plastic cable tie. The investigation shifted from a missing persons case to a murder inquiry. Authorities believe the killer was likely a local resident. 2 key pieces of evidence support this theory. Leanne's body was found just 16 miles from where she was last seen, and the yellow cable used to bind her hands is commonly used by the British postal system, especially Royal Mail or Parcel Force. The green garbage bags used to wrap Leanne's body were identified as coming from Morrison's, a popular grocery store chain with 2 locations in the area. Investigators collected DNA samples from Leanne's family members, friends, and known sex offenders in the area, hoping to find a match. In addition, a thorough search of the bushland area where Leanne's body was buried was conducted. The investigation into Leanne's death was ongoing, but one thing puzzled detectives: her body was found in an area that had been thoroughly searched before, and it didn't show the usual signs of decomposition after 9 months. Her hair was still styled in the same ponytail with the same hair tie and clip she had when she went missing. The medical examiner's analysis of her cardiac tissue revealed that Leanne was killed on the day she was kidnapped, and her body was stored in a cold environment for months. The killer attempted to dispose of her body by leaving it in a common dump area, wrapped in a duvet, a few weeks before it was discovered. Although the killer tried to hide the body, he accidentally saved a significant amount of forensic evidence and DNA. However, when authorities analyzed the body, they were disappointed to find no DNA evidence of the killer. They then turned their attention to investigating the items found with Leanne's body, hoping to find clues that will help them catch the killer. The investigation found dog hair on Leanne's clothes, leading police to attempt to create a DNA profile of the dog in the hope of identifying the killer. The dog hair was sent to a Texas university that specializes in DNA profiling of purebred pets. Although the university was able to obtain a partial DNA profile, they were unable to match it to a specific dog, so analysis was stopped. A knitted scarf was found around Leanne's neck containing knotted human hair. The hair was submitted for DNA testing, and a DNA profile was successfully created from the small amount of DNA found inside the hair shaft. The police then turned their attention to the dog collar that had been used to wrap a black bin liner around Leanne's neck. The collar was found to have been manufactured by a company called Armitage Leather Products, based in Nottingham. Detectives hoped that if the killer had purchased the dog collar from them, they might be able to obtain his name or address. The police reached out to the manufacturer and requested sales records. After analyzing these documents, investigators contacted more than 220 wholesalers across the UK. Their 112th inquiry proved successful. They contacted a company called Pet Pajamas, based in Liverpool, which revealed that it had sold 3 of the distinctive dog collars in question. Pet Pajamas provided investigators with details of the 3 customers who had bought these items. The detectives started investigating the customers and soon identified a prime suspect, John Taylor from Bramley, near the area where Leanne was last seen. Taylor's name had previously come up during the investigation when Leanne's body was found. At the time, witnesses reported that Taylor was frequently seen in the woods with his dog. By the time investigators prepared to question Taylor, he had already stated that his dog had passed away before Leanne's murder, sparking suspicion that he may have deliberately killed his pet to conceal evidence. At first glance, John Taylor seemed like a regular person. He was a 45-year-old man working as a delivery driver for Parcel Force, a division of the Royal Mail. He had no serious criminal history except for one instance when he stole a suit as a 15-year-old. He was previously married, with the couple having 2 children, a son in 1981 and a daughter in 1983, before they got a divorce in 1996. He appeared to be living a solitary and unassuming life in a modest house on Cockshot Drive, Bramley, Leeds. Taylor's neighbors consider him a normal person, but he enjoys causing pain to animals. He would hunt and torture rabbits, stab foxes, and bludgeon pheasants to death. In 1982, Taylor started breeding dogs and ferrets at his home on Cockshot Drive, which led to a buildup of animal waste. The smell eventually became unbearable for his wife, Janet, who had always taken pride in their home. Janet could no longer tolerate the situation and filed for divorce. Taylor frequently traveled around the country, not for work but to meet women he had contacted online. He often uses the internet to find female friends online and often has sex with them. Investigators later tracked down some of these women through Taylor's phone records and interviewed them. While most described him as harmless, some admitted to having called the police to report him as a suspect after the discovery of Leanne's body. 2 women, in particular, described Taylor as someone who enjoyed violence during intimate encounters. He even told one woman that he had a desire to have sex with her daughter. A former girlfriend of Taylor's ended their relationship due to his fascination with bondage. She reported that Taylor would restrain her hands with cable ties and cover her face with scarves. When questioned by investigators, she described Taylor's method of restraint, which involved using a bundle of cable ties stored in his bedside drawer. He would bind her wrists with 2 cable ties and then connect them behind her back with a 3rd tie. This technique was eerily similar to the way Leanne's body was found, and the details had not been publicly disclosed. 10 months after Leanne's disappearance, Taylor was arrested and brought in for questioning. A warrant was issued for his DNA and a search of his property. The police immediately cordoned off his house on Cockshot Drive and conducted a thorough search of the premises. In the backyard, they discovered a hedge plant, a plum tree, and a poplar tree. Pollen from these plants was found on Leanne's hair, skin, and nasal tract, indicating that she had been at the location before her death. During the search, police excavated the garden and found the remains of various animals, including 28 ferrets buried in a mass grave and the skeletons of 4 dogs. One of the dogs, a tan and black terrier, had a crushed skull. It is possible that Taylor killed his dog to conceal his identity after learning that the police were looking for a suspect with a dog. Forensic tests revealed that the hairs found on Leanne's body matched those of the tan and black terrier. Investigators gathered crucial evidence linking Taylor to Leanne's murder inside the house. A closer examination of the floorboards revealed pink carpet fibers caught on nails, which matched the fibers found on Leanne's body. Additionally, a blood stain belonging to Leanne was discovered under the floorboards. The twine used to tie the bin liners around Leanne's body was identified as part of a unique batch produced by a manufacturer in Devon, specifically designed for making rabbit-catching nets. A matching batch was found in Taylor's home. Further investigation revealed a stash of yellow zip ties in Taylor's house, which were manufactured by an Italian company exclusively for the Royal Mail. As Taylor worked for Parcel Force, a division of Royal Mail, it was easy for him to obtain these ties. A nail in John's kitchen had the same type of garbage bag wrapped around it, adding to the evidence. 3 large freezers were also found on the property, although their significance was not immediately clear. Initially, Taylor denied knowing Leanne or being involved in her murder. However, when giving evidence, Taylor admitted to kidnapping Leanne but insisted her death was an accident. He claimed that Leanne died from a fall that hit her head. According to investigators, Leanne's death did not occur as a result of a fall, as claimed by Taylor. In reality, Taylor attacked Leanne from behind while she was walking alone on the unlit path of Holly Gill. There were no eyewitnesses, but a stifled scream was reported. Investigators concluded that Taylor then strangled Leanne and bound her hands with cable ties, resulting in her death. In 2002, John Taylor, 46, was found guilty of murdering and kidnapping Leanne. He received 2 life sentences and will be eligible for parole after 20 years. After his conviction, investigators discovered that Taylor had committed previous crimes. Once his DNA was added to the police database, they matched him to 2 old assault cases. One assault occurred on October 18, 1988. A 32-year-old woman was attacked while walking to pick up her kids from school on Holly Gill. Taylor was masked and carried a knife. Another attack happened on March 1, 1989, when Taylor entered a Bramley house through force, masked and with a knife. He dragged a 21-year-old mother into her bedroom and attacked her. He also stripped, blindfolded, and gagged her, while her 18-month-old daughter cried in the next room. The investigation into Leanne's murder showed a clear calculation in the disposal of her body. After her murder, Taylor kept her body in his kitchen freezer. In the years following Leanne's case, police conducted a nationwide review of similar cold cases. In 2018, the full extent of John Taylor's heinous crimes came to light when he confessed to a series of vile acts committed against 5 women between 1977 and 1996. One of these incidents involved holding a knife to the throat of a pregnant woman and forcing her to perform a degrading act. Another incident occurred in 1977, just before Christmas, when he assaulted a barmaid. Taylor pleaded guilty to these attacks and was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. He is currently serving his sentence at Wakefield Prison, a maximum security facility notorious for housing infamous and violent offenders. Many questions remain about the extent of Taylor's crimes, including how many more murders and assaults he may have committed and how far back his crimes date. It is also unclear how he managed to evade capture for so long. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Sarah Johnson. In the quiet town of Bellevue, Idaho, a typical Tuesday morning on September 2, 2003, turned into a chaotic scene. At 6:20 a.m., residents were jolted by the sound of gunshots, followed by the wailing of sirens as sheriff's deputies from Blake County rushed to the Johnson residence. Inside the house, officers found a gruesome scene. Diane Johnson had been shot once in the head and was found in bed, while her husband Alan Johnson lay dead on the floor, having been shot once in the chest. A 16-year-old girl named Sarah was left shaken but unharmed after a traumatic event. As detectives investigated the scene, they discovered surprising secrets that ultimately led to a stunning discovery. But who had Sarah's parents, Diane and Alan, wronged, and what series of events led to their heartbreaking deaths? A frantic 911 call was made after a neighbor reported a horrific crime. The caller stated that a 16-year-old girl, Sarah Johnson, had arrived at her doorstep, frantically screaming that her parents had been shot. The caller reported hearing 2 gunshots. According to the neighbor, Kim, Sarah had run to her house in a state of panic, claiming that her parents, Diane and Alan Johnson, had been murdered. The police and emergency responders were immediately dispatched to the scene. Upon arrival, law enforcement officials entered the house and were met with a disturbing scene. They found Diane, 52, in bed with a fatal gunshot wound to her head. It appeared that she had been killed while she was asleep. The walls and ceiling near the headboard were splattered with blood, and a fragment of her skull was found on the floor. Alan's body was found on the floor beside Diane's side of the bed. He was wearing only a towel, and a large pool of blood had formed around him. Initially, police thought they had a clear-cut murder-suicide case. However, as they took a closer look at the crime scene, their theory quickly unraveled. At the scene, investigators noticed the sound of running water and followed the trail of blood to the adjacent bathroom. The shower was still on. Once they turned off the water, they observed blood splatter on the walls and a single bullet hole in the shower wall. The officers then expanded their search of the house for more evidence. In the bedroom where Diane's body was found, investigators discovered what they believed to be the murder weapon, a .264 caliber Winston rifle, on the floor. At the foot of the bed, 2 kitchen knives were also discovered. Another knife was found on the bed of the Johnson's son, Matt. The placement of these knives baffled investigators. The presence of the knives at the scene raised many questions. It was unclear why they were placed in such a deliberate manner and what significance they held. A further peculiarity was the lack of forced entry, which suggested that the killer may have been someone familiar with the family's habits. Specifically, the fact that the Johnsons rarely locked their doors, a detail known only to those close to them, seemed particularly relevant. Additionally, the house showed no signs of having been ransacked, which contradicted the possibility of a robbery gone wrong. Sarah told police she was asleep when she heard a gunshot. She immediately got up and ran to her parents' bedroom to call out for her mother. That's when she heard a second gunshot. Fearful for her safety, Sarah rushed to her neighbor's house for help. She didn't see the person who fired the shots. Her neighbor, Kim Richards, backed up Sarah's account and was the one who called 911. On the property was a separate guest house that belonged to a family friend, 45-year-old Mel Spiegel. As investigators entered the house, they discovered a crucial piece of evidence on the bed, the scope from the rifle found at the crime scene. However, Mel Spiegel was unexpectedly absent. His sudden disappearance raised suspicions, making him a person of interest for the investigators. Sergeant Walt Femling ordered the property sealed off and instructed officers to stop the waste disposal truck from collecting trash. A critical piece of evidence was nearly collected and taken away, but a deputy intervened just in time, stopping the truck just a house away. The theory was that Mel had a confrontation with Alan and Diane, which escalated into a violent argument, resulting in their deaths. As investigators explored this possibility, forensic teams searched the trash cans and found additional evidence. Inside a bundled-up pink bathrobe, they discovered a latex glove, a single brown leather glove matching the one found in the Johnsons' bedroom, and ammunition for a .25 caliber gun. The evidence was carefully tagged and sent for DNA testing. As investigators pieced together their own scenario, it became clear that the killer likely had prior knowledge of the Johnsons' unlocked doors and the trash collection schedule. It was possible that the killer disposed of the evidence in the trash before fleeing the scene after the double homicide. Mel was located in Boise, Idaho. He voluntarily met with investigators at the Boise police station. The investigators inquired about Mel's activities earlier that day, and Mel stated that he had spent the weekend with his family. He was planning to return to Bell in a week. To verify Mel's alibi, investigators contacted his family members, who confirmed that he was indeed with them. During the conversation, Mel discussed his relationship with Alan and Diane, explaining that he had rented the guest house from they for years. Mel described his relationship with they as close and very good. When questioned about the rifle used in the murders, Mel acknowledged that it was his, but claimed it had been stored in his closet before he left for Boise over the weekend. Investigators then inquired about potential enemies of they. Mel shared that Alan and Diane had been concerned about their daughter Sarah's relationship with 19-year-old Bruno Santos, who was allegedly living in the country without proper documentation and selling drugs. Mel specifically mentioned Bruno Santos as someone investigators should look into. Mel encouraged investigators to talk to other family members, leading them to reconstruct the Johnson family's history. Here's what they discovered. Alan and Diane Johnson's relationship began in the early 1980s. At the time, Diane was a single mother to a toddler son, Matt, from a previous relationship. They got married in 1983, and Alan adopted Matt as his own son. The family settled in a beautiful home in the quiet city of Bell, Idaho. In 1987, they welcomed a new addition, a daughter named Sarah Johnson, born on January 25. Their children, Matt and Sarah, were both doing well in their studies. Matt, who was 22 at the time, was a university student at the University of Idaho in Moscow. Sarah was not only excelling in her schoolwork, but was also an accomplished athlete on her school's volleyball team and received adoring attention from her father Alan. The investigators had been ruling out potential suspects and were about to reveal underlying family conflicts that had been escalating over the past few months. With Mel cleared as a suspect, the Johnson family was known to be happy and loving, but things changed when Sarah started dating Bruno Santos. Investigators interviewed the family members, including Matt, the son who had returned home from university, and Diane's sister and brother-in-law, Linda and Jim Fave. All of them described the family life as happy and normal until Sarah and Bruno became a couple. According to Matt, Linda, and Jim, Sarah's relationship with Bruno caused significant tension in the family, which escalated over the months leading up to the murder. Sarah resisted her parents' rules, particularly when they forbade her from seeing Bruno again. Despite this, she continued to defy them. Jim revealed to investigators that Bruno had a potential motive to murder Diane and Alan. A few days before the murders, Alan and Diane had discovered that Sarah had lied about sleeping over at a friend's house. In reality, she had spent the night with Bruno. Alan informed Jim about the situation and asked him to join them in confronting Bruno. Jim informed investigators that Alan was enraged and threatened to report Bruno to the police for assaulting underage Sarah. The three then left together. A charge of this severity could result in Bruno's deportation. After hearing Jim's account, investigators suspected that Bruno had a strong motive to harm the Johnsons. They decided it was time to speak with Bruno. Santos County Police were familiar with Bruno Santos, a high school dropout with a history of minor drug-related offenses. When questioned, Bruno became confrontational and arrogant, making it challenging for investigators to deal with him. During questioning, Bruno claimed he had recently proposed to Sarah, and she had accepted. It's thought that Bruno made this claim to demonstrate his love for Sarah and prove that he wouldn't have done anything to harm their relationship. When investigators inquired about his whereabouts on the morning of the murders, Bruno said he was sleeping on the couch at his residence. He suggested that officers contact his mother, who confirmed that she was also at home with him at the time. Despite this, his alibi was not considered particularly solid. When investigators questioned Bruno about the murders of Alan and Diane Johnson, Bruno expressed his hatred for Alan and Diane Johnson. Bruno was initially the prime suspect because of his obvious motive. He was angry with the Johnson family, especially Diane, Sarah's mother. By killing the Johnsons, Bruno hoped to be with Sarah. The investigation into Bruno's involvement in the Alan and Diane Johnson murders took a significant step forward when a search warrant was executed at his home. As a result, the clothing and shoes he wore on the day of the incident were seized for forensic testing. Additionally, Bruno's fingerprints were taken to compare with any prints found at the crime scene. A DNA sample was also collected from Bruno at the hospital, along with hair clippings and scrapings from his hands. Based on the evidence gathered, Bruno was identified as the primary suspect in the murders of Alan and Diane Johnson. Despite thorough investigation, forensic experts found no evidence linking Bruno to the crime scene. Neither Diane's nor Alan's blood was found on Bruno's clothes or shoes, and no DNA, hair, or fingerprints from the accused were detected near the bodies. Additionally, no physical evidence placed Bruno in their room. The gloves and bathrobe tested negative for any incriminating evidence. The crime scene yielded no DNA or fingerprints from Bruno, and no blood or DNA from the victims was found on his clothing. Bruno was eventually ruled out as a suspect in the case. As investigators took a closer look, their attention turned to someone else. They began to question Sarah's family and friends more thoroughly about her home life and personal relationships. This led to the discovery that Sarah had been prescribed antidepressants and that her relationship with her parents was strained. Her family members had initially dismissed her behavior as typical for a teenager, assuming she was going through a normal phase of rebellion and testing boundaries with her parents. Linda, Sarah's aunt, grew increasingly suspicious of her niece's behavior in the aftermath of her parents' deaths. She reported to investigators that Sarah was not exhibiting the typical signs of grieving and instead seemed more focused on returning to her normal routine with friends and school. Sarah showed little emotional response to the loss of her parents, which Linda found unusual and even alarming. Her reactions seemed remarkably detached and strange. This raised more questions, prompting investigators to speak with some of Sarah's friends to gather more insight into her behavior following the tragic events. It was clear to everyone that Sarah did not show enough concern about the deaths of Alan and Diane Johnson. In fact, she seemed more focused on her own appearance, particularly getting her nails painted. What struck investigators as unusual, however, was Sarah's reaction to Bruno's arrest. Instead of being angry, she appeared to be worried about him, which seemed odd given that he was suspected of killing her parents. This remark led investigators to consider Sarah as a potential suspect, the most worrying aspect being that Sarah could commit such a heinous crime. The Johnsons' home remained an active crime scene, with investigators now focusing on Sarah's room as a second key area of interest. A question had arisen about how the blood splatter had traveled such a distance. To address this, a gun expert was brought in to examine the splatter pattern more closely. After analyzing the trajectory from Alan and Diane's room to Sarah's, the expert determined that both bedroom doors were open at the time of the shooting. This conclusion was supported by the presence of blood deposits on the back edge of Sarah's door, where the hinges are located, suggesting that the door was open, allowing the projectile to enter her bedroom. This meant that both bedroom doors, as well as Sarah's door, were open, and there was a hallway in between. During the investigation, plumbers were called to the scene to address a clogged toilet in one of the bathrooms. The clog was found to be caused by a shower cap. As a result, investigators decided to question Linda, Matt, and Mel Spiegel about some of the evidence they had discovered. Both Matt and Linda identified a pink bathrobe as belonging to Sarah. Mel Spiegel confirmed that Sarah had a key to the guest house. He also revealed that Sarah was aware of the gun stored in the closet. However, investigators faced a challenge in linking Sarah to the evidence. Eyewitnesses reported that Sarah did not have any visible blood on her when she ran to a neighbor's house for help on the morning of the murders. Forensic experts used luminol to test Sarah's clothes for blood splatter, but found none. Despite this, investigators obtained a warrant to seize and test the clothes Sarah was wearing that morning. Meanwhile, investigators asked Sarah to return for another interview to determine if her account had changed since they last spoke. They had noticed small inconsistencies in her previous statements. When questioned again, investigators found that Sarah's story had altered significantly. Specifically, they identified at least 5 changes to her explanations. In some instances, she claimed to have been asleep and was awoken by the sound of a gunshot, but her story varied across different interviews. When questioned about the door to her parents' room, Sarah struggled to recall whether it was open or closed at the time of the shooting. Despite Sarah's inconsistencies, investigators maintained a calm demeanor during questioning to avoid raising her suspicions. They were already aware that both bedroom doors were open, which was the only explanation for the blood splatter on Sarah's bedroom wall. As part of the investigation to clear her name, Sarah was asked to provide a DNA sample, hair samples, and hand scrapings, all of which were sent to the lab for testing. The pajama top and bottom she was wearing on the morning of the murders were also sent to the lab for examination by forensic specialist Rod Engard. Under a high-powered microscope, Engard found no blood on the front of the robe. However, on the back of the garment, he discovered patterns of high-velocity blood splatter. These stains were extremely small, some even smaller than a pencil mark, and were layered on top of each other, indicating a high-energy impact. He discovered blue cotton fibers and green paint specks on the inside of the robe that matched the shirt Sarah wore that morning. However, the most incriminating evidence was yet to come. Lab results confirmed that Sarah's DNA was found on the inner lining of the latex glove, and gun residue was detected on both pairs of the brown leather gloves. The robe, leather gloves, and latex gloves were sent to a lab in Chicago, Kahn and Associates, for further analysis. The lab found gunshot residue on all 3 items. The blood on the gloves and robe belonged to both Alan and Diane. This evidence was sufficient for investigators to arrest and charge Sarah with the double homicide of Alan and Diane Johnson on October 29, 2003. Sarah Johnson was arrested for the murders of her parents, Alan and Diane Johnson, and was held without bail at the Blake County Jail awaiting trial. The shocking crime made headlines across the country, captivating the nation's attention and sparking a media frenzy. To build a case against Sarah, investigators and prosecutors had to create a convincing argument that demonstrated her motivation and capability to commit such a horrific crime. Sarah's parents disapproved of her relationship with Bruno from the start. As a result, Sarah began sneaking around behind their backs and acting out in typical teenage fashion. However, the turning point came just a few days before the murders. A heated argument with her parents drove Sarah to desperation. She had lied about staying with a friend, when in reality she was with Bruno. Her father's threats to have Bruno charged with assault and deported to Mexico pushed Sarah to the edge. Investigators and prosecutors believe that this was the moment Sarah hatched a plan to eliminate her parents and start a new life with Bruno. On the morning of the murders, she went to the guest house to retrieve the rifle, setting the events in motion. Sarah carefully prepared herself to commit the crime by putting on latex gloves, leather gloves, and a shower cap to prevent blood from getting on her hair and clothes. She then went to her parents' room, where she shot her mother, Diane, in the head while she was asleep. When her father, Alan, got out of the shower and opened the bathroom door, Sarah shot him in the chest. After killing her parents, Sarah attempted to make it look like an intruder had committed the crime by placing knives in the bedrooms. She then gathered up the evidence and threw it away in the trash, hoping that the waste disposal company would collect it before investigators could find it. However, she made a critical mistake by not considering the evidence that would be found in her own room. Additionally, the shower cap she had worn became lodged in a plumbing system, leaving behind a crucial piece of evidence. The evidence against Sarah Johnson was overwhelming, and her trial began in February 2005, 2 years after her parents' murders. At 18 years old, Sarah stood accused of killing her parents. Her defense team maintained that Sarah was innocent and that an intruder had committed the crime. However, the prosecution was well prepared to present their case. They introduced physical evidence found at the crime scene and testimonies from family and friends that raised suspicions about Sarah's behavior. On the morning of the murders, there were 3 people in the Johnson household: Alan, Diane, and Sarah. 2 of them did not survive. The one person who did come out alive was Sarah Johnson, who was now sitting in the courtroom. The most damaging testimony came from Bruno Santos, who not only sought to clear his own name in the murder trial but also provided the jury with insight into Sarah's state of mind before the murders. Bruno testified that he and Sarah had planned to get married and that she had described a future where they would live together in a beautiful house, happy with just each other. He also revealed that Sarah frequently expressed her hatred for her father and even talked about shooting him. After 5 weeks of testimony, evidence, and explanations of the crime scene, the jury delivered its verdict on March 16, 2005. Sarah, 18, was convicted of 2 counts of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison without parole at the Pocatello Women's Correctional Center in Idaho. Despite making multiple appeals to reduce her sentence, Sarah remains in custody as all her appeals have been denied. Following her sentencing, her family members have publicly expressed their feelings about Sarah and her actions. The murders of Alan and Diane have had a devastating impact on their family, with most members believing that Sarah is responsible and deserves her punishment. Sarah's brother, Matt, has stated that Sarah showed no remorse for killing their parents and believes that if given a second chance, she would try to avoid being caught again. At the sentencing hearing, Pat Dishman, Diane's mother, addressed Sarah directly. She told her granddaughter that despite everything, they still loved her. However, her actions had left a devastating impact on their entire family. "We've been absolutely destroyed by the loss of your Alan and Diane, and it was even harder to come to terms with the fact that it was you who did it." Alan's sister Lynn expressed her concerns about Sarah's character, stating that she is spoiled and violent, and capable of committing murder if released from prison. Lynn urged the judge to consider keeping Sarah incarcerated permanently. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Scott Ponder. Scott Dean Ponder was born on February 7, 1973, to a loving family. His mother, Beverly Guy, and stepfather, Terry Guy, encouraged his passion for cars and motorcycles from a young age. They supported his development as a rider and even helped him obtain a racing license as soon as he was eligible. Scott's talent and dedication earned him recognition, including numerous admirers and local hero status in Chesney. Scott was a sociable person who enjoyed spending time with many people, and they enjoyed his company as well. In the late 1990s, Scott started repairing bikes in his grandmother's backyard, which eventually led to the establishment of Superbike Motorsports. The business expanded to a one-garage building in 2001, and Scott brought in his best friend, Brian Lucas, as a partner. They partnered to obtain a Suzuki dealership, resulting in swift expansion and achievement. Brian, who initially worked part-time when the business first started, left his job to become the store's full-time manager. Through their dedication and expertise, the duo attracted numerous customers, and the business began to flourish. Despite being salesmen, they prioritized educating their customers about bikes and racing. Scott's mother, Beverly Guy, who initially visited the store occasionally, began to visit regularly and eventually took on responsibilities such as accounting, payroll, and cash management. With the trio's combined efforts, the business thrived, selling 100,000 motorbikes every month. Scott attended an industry convention in Chicago, where he met his future wife, Melissa Brackman, a former homecoming queen from Stafford High School. They instantly connected and enjoyed each other's company, leading to frequent meetups as their relationship deepened. Eventually, they decided to get married, and their love life, both before and after the wedding, resembled a fairy tale, with their love growing stronger each day. I met Scott at a motorcycle show in Indianapolis, where he struck me as a kind and charming Southern gentleman. My feelings for him developed rapidly, and I soon realized I was in love with him. Scott and I decided to start a family, but we struggled to conceive. We sought medical help, and after months of trying, I finally became pregnant with a baby boy. In October 2003, I discovered I was pregnant while visiting my hometown. I took a pregnancy test at my brother's house without telling anyone, and I was overjoyed when the test was positive. Scott was thrilled when I shared the news with him. Around the same time, Scott's business was booming, with millions of dollars in sales in the first year. To keep up with the demand, he expanded his store and hired a new mechanic, Chris Sherbert. Chris was well known in town for his exceptional wrench skills, which caught Scott's attention. Scott, Beverly, Brian, and Chris formed a talented team that gained recognition beyond their small town of Chesney. Scott Ponder's life was going smoothly until disaster struck. November 6, 2003, was a sunny day, but the atmosphere at Superbike Motorsports was vastly different. You might remember where you were on that day. I recall it clearly. I had spoken to Scott around 2:15 p.m., and our conversation was brief and normal. He said goodbye, and that was the last time we spoke. Scott and the others began their day at the shop as usual. The store had a few customers browsing, including Kelly Sisk and his 4-year-old son. Kelly was there to purchase a go-kart for his family, and after completing the transaction, he lingered in the shop for a bit. Brian was supposed to be on holiday with his family, but Scott called him in to address a customer complaint about a neglected bike. Brian arrived at the shop and immediately started working on the bike. Meanwhile, Scott was helping another customer when his mother, Beverly, stopped by. She had just taken Scott's cancer-stricken grandmother to chemotherapy and was planning to deposit money into Scott's account at the bank later that day, around 2:30 p.m. Beverly lent a hand to Scott at the counter, assisting him with his tasks. Scott's friend Noel called the Superbike Motorsports shop, also known as the shop. Beverly answered the phone and agreed to let Noel stop by, which he said would take only 7 minutes. After hanging up, Beverly went to use the bathroom. Within those 7 minutes, a tragic event unfolded. Scott, Brian, Beverly, and Chris, the 4 people present at the shop, were brutally shot and killed. The shooting occurred at 3 p.m. inside the Superbike Motorsports premises. When Scott's friend Noel arrived, he found Scott and Brian lying motionless at the front of the shop. Initially, Noel thought they were playing a prank and even kicked them, telling them to stop joking around. However, upon seeing the pool of blood beneath their bodies, he quickly realized the gravity of the situation and called 911. Noel reported the incident to the emergency operator, stating that everyone at the shop had been shot and was lying in a pool of blood, including his mom, the mechanic, and the owner. The police and paramedics rushed to the scene, as this was the first quadruple murder in the small town of Chesney. The news spread rapidly, drawing not only the victims' families but also a crowd of onlookers to the crime scene. The police launched an immediate investigation and began collecting evidence at the crime scene. They discovered Chris's body at the back of the shop, positioned as if he had been working on a bike just before being killed. Beverly's body was found inside the shop, near the bathroom, suggesting she was ambushed as she exited. The bodies of Brian and Scott were located at the front of the store, with Brian's closer to the door and Scott's closer to a parked car. It appeared that both men had attempted to flee after hearing gunshots and encountering the shooter, but were unsuccessful. A thorough search of the crime scene by the police and forensic team yielded blood samples and other evidence. The killings were determined to be an execution-style homicide, with the shooter intentionally targeting the victims and shooting them at close range in the chest and head. Melissa, Scott's wife, received a call about the shooting and rushed to the scene. Detectives launched a thorough investigation and quickly found their first lead. Several passers-by reported seeing a couple lingering near the shop around the time of the murder. The detectives created sketches of the suspects based on the eyewitnesses' descriptions and distributed the pictures throughout South Carolina. The detectives initially suspected that the man and they was the shooter, and that he had attacked Chris and Beverly from behind while she distracted Scott and Brian at the front of the shop. However, this was only a theory, and no concrete evidence supported it. Despite months of searching, the police were unable to find any new leads. As media coverage intensified, detectives re-examined the case from a different angle, which ultimately led to a breakthrough. The detectives began to scrutinize the victims' pasts and lifestyles. While Scott, Beverly, and Brian appeared to be clean, Chris, the mechanic, had a more complex background. During the investigation, detectives discovered that Chris had previously worked for a company with ties to the drug trade. It was also revealed that Chris may have been involved in smuggling and was set to appear in court the following Monday, prior to the murders. In 2003, the police were actively working to combat a growing drug problem, particularly among young people. With Chris's connection to the drug trade now apparent, detectives and the public began to question whether the motive behind the quadruple homicide was to kill Chris specifically, with the other victims being unintentional casualties. It was also speculated that Chris's scheduled court appearance may have been a motive for his murder, as those involved in the drug business may have believed he would testify against them. Although this theory seemed plausible, particularly given that Chris was the first to be shot, there was no concrete evidence to support it. As a result, the investigation once again stalled. The case remained unsolved for an entire year, until the detectives decided to approach it from a fresh perspective. The detectives discovered that Brian, a friend and co-worker of Scott's, had been searching for a new house weeks before the murder. However, his wife Robin claimed to have had no knowledge of this decision. This revelation raised suspicions about the state of their marriage. Brian's mother, Lorraine Lucas, later revealed that their marriage was unhappy and strained, and that Brian had been planning to leave Robin to live alone. Lorraine recalled a tense encounter between Brian and Robin, during which Robin made faces behind Brian's back, leading to a confrontation when Brian asked her to treat his mother with respect. While this incident may not have seemed directly related to the shooting at first, it would later become a crucial piece of the puzzle. The quadruple murder was a catastrophic event that left the families of the 4 victims deeply traumatized and devastated. Melissa, in particular, struggled to cope with the loss of her beloved husband. Her life was once flawless, but a devastating event changed everything, leaving her to put the shattered remains back together. Despite her grief, Melissa found the strength to carry on for the sake of her newborn son, Scott Ponder Jr., who was born in June 2004. The police continued to call on Melissa for questioning, but she remained strong for her child's sake. In a surprising turn of events, the police obtained a DNA sample from Scott Ponder Jr.'s diaper, which was collected after Melissa had changed him at the station. The results of the DNA test shocked everyone, revealing that Ponder Jr.'s DNA matched Brian's, not Scott's. This discovery sparked tension between Melissa and her father-in-law, William Ponder, who repeatedly questioned her about the truth. Melissa was told that the detectives believed they had evidence linking her to the crime, and she was given a clear warning: if the proof implicated her, they would come for her wherever she was. As the investigation continued, the detectives began to focus on a possible love triangle between Scott, Melissa, and Brian. Rumors about Melissa's infidelity soon spread throughout the neighborhood, further complicating the case. Brian's mother considered the possibility of him having an affair due to his unhappiness in marriage and the thought of divorce. However, Melissa consistently denied any involvement with Brian and affirmed Scott Ponder child's paternity, stating that she and Scott Ponder had struggled to conceive. Melissa was certain that the child belonged to her and Scott, and she remained convinced even after being questioned multiple times. For a year and a half, detectives monitored Melissa's every move, searching for a lead. Then, after 18 months, they revealed a startling discovery: the blood sample collected from the crime scene contained an error. A DNA test showed a match between Brian and Beverly's DNA, which should not be the case since Scott was Beverly's son, not Brian. Realizing their mistake, detectives understood that the blood samples from Scott and Brian had been mislabeled due to their close proximity at the crime scene. The discovery cleared Melissa's name regarding the love triangle theory, and detectives began to investigate a connection between the Superbike Motorsports homicide and another murder that occurred just 30 meters away, 5 months earlier. On May 16, 2003, a triple homicide shook the town of Greer, South Carolina. The incident took place at the Blue Ridge Savings Bank, where Sylvia Holtzclaw was due to start her shift. However, a local couple, Dee and Maggie Barnes, visited the bank at around 1:30 p.m. A 911 call was made to the Greer Police Department, reporting a shooting at the bank. Unfortunately, Sylvia, Dee, and Maggie were found shot to death. The Greer Police Department received a distress call from the Blue Ridge Savings Bank. One of the responding officers described the scene, noting that they were among the first to arrive. Like the Superbike Motorsports incident, the shooting occurred in broad daylight with no witnesses present. After reviewing the CCTV footage, police observed a red car driving towards the bank at 1:24 p.m. and leaving 3 minutes after the incident. A red car was spotted driving to a bank on Frontage Road at 1:24 p.m. 3 minutes later, the Barnes family was seen driving in the same area. Coincidentally, a similar red car was seen at the scene of a quadruple homicide at Superbike Motorsports. Detectives began searching for the red car and discovered it had been stolen from a rental lot by 39-year-old Emerson Wright days before the homicide. Police believed Emerson had entered the bank to rob it, but panicked and shot a couple who tried to intervene. However, detectives were unable to question Emerson about the bank and Superbike Motorsports murders due to a series of events that unfolded 2 years later. Emerson was wanted for a string of burglaries in the Atlanta area when he was chased by a state trooper. He crashed his car, got out, and shot himself in the head with a single gunshot wound. Although detectives noted similarities between their cases, they did not believe they were connected. The quadruple homicide at Superbike Motorsports in 2003 went cold just months later, leaving the victims' families, including Melissa, without any answers for 13 long years. Despite the lack of progress, Melissa and the other families of the victims refused to give up, tirelessly searching for any lead that might uncover the truth behind the gruesome crime. Unfortunately, their efforts yielded nothing. However, in 2016, the case was reopened after detectives made a breakthrough. This development brought new hope to the families, 13 years after the crime had taken place. The man behind the quadruple murder finally emerged when he was arrested for an unrelated crime. During his interrogation, he confessed to the Superbike Motorsports murders. The killer was 45 years old Todd Kohlhepp, born on March 7, 1971, to parents Reggie and William. After his parents' divorce when he was just 2 years old, Todd began living with his mother and her new partner, but he often sought to spend more time with his biological father. Todd's behavior was extremely aggressive and volatile, particularly when he was young. He struggled with controlling his anger, which often led to violent outbursts. During his time in nursery school, he killed a goldfish with bleach and shot a dog with a BB gun. Despite spending 3.5 months in a psychiatric hospital in Georgia, his behavior showed no signs of improvement. As a last resort, his mother, Ray G., sent him to live with his father, William, in the hopes that a change of environment would help him manage his behavior. However, this change had little effect. At the age of 15, Todd planned and executed the kidnapping of 14-year-old Christy Granado in Tempe, Arizona, on November 25, 1986. Todd knocked on Christy's door, threatened her with a .22 caliber revolver, and forced her to follow him to his home. Once there, he tied her up, taped her mouth shut, and assaulted her. After the assault, he walked her home and threatened to kill her entire family if she told anyone about the incident. However, Christy confided in her parents, who immediately called 911. As a result, Todd was charged with kidnapping, sexual assault, and committing a dangerous crime against children. In 1987, he pleaded guilty to the kidnapping charge, and the other charges were dropped. Todd was sentenced to 15 years in prison and was required to register as a sex offender. When Todd was released, he was a reformed person and he turned over a new leaf, started his own business, and even got a job. For a long time, there were no more complaints filed against him. However, in 2016, a disturbing incident occurred. On August 31, 2016, 30-year-old Carla Brown and her 32-year-old boyfriend, Charlie David Carver, went missing after they were last seen visiting Todd's house to remove brush from one of his properties. Investigations led to a horrific discovery on November 3, 2016, when Carla was found chained to a wall inside a metal storage container on Todd's property. Further investigations uncovered the body of Charlie, which had multiple gunshot wounds. Carla reported to detectives that Todd had shot Charlie and kept her captive, regularly assaulting her brutally and threatening her not to try to escape. Todd was arrested and taken in for questioning. During the interrogation, he confessed to being the one responsible for a shooting that occurred at Superbike Motorsports 13 years earlier. On November 5, 2016, Todd was brought in for questioning and recounted the events of November 6, 2003, in a matter-of-fact way, without showing any signs of fear or guilt. According to Todd, on November 6, 2003, he bought a Suzuki GSX-R 750 from Superbike Motorsports, but soon realized he couldn't ride it due to his lack of experience. He decided to exchange the bike for a more beginner-friendly model. However, this exchange didn't happen on the same day. Todd told the detectives that his friends Scott and Brian teased him about his inability to ride the bike. After the bike theft, which occurred 14 days after the purchase, Todd filed a police report, but the bike was never recovered. Adding to his frustration, the police officer handling the case made fun of him, and neither the police nor the shop contacted him about the stolen bike or the $1,000 insurance deposit he had lost. Todd began attending college at Greenville Tech, but his interest in bikes never waned. He found himself returning to superbike motorsports, where he had previously shopped. However, his interactions with two employees, Scott and Chris, turned negative. According to Todd, they would mock and laugh at him whenever he visited the shop. One day, Todd decided to take revenge on they men. He waited until the shop was empty, except for Scott, Chris, Beverly, and himself. Then, he shot and killed the 4 people he had encountered. Todd later claimed that Beverly was not his intended target, but rather an innocent bystander who was in the wrong place at the wrong time. The victims' families finally found some closure and justice after 13 years, thanks to Todd's confession. In addition to the killings at Superbike Motorsports, Todd confessed to murdering Johnny, Joe and Megan Lee Coxey, and Charlie David Carver, all of whom died from gunshot wounds. Despite being a serial killer, Todd did not face a trial. Instead, prosecutors negotiated a plea deal with him after consulting with the victims' families and a survivor. As part of the deal, the state offered Todd a sentence of life in prison without the possibility of parole, which he accepted just 7 months after his arrest. Todd was sentenced to 7 consecutive life sentences on May 23, 2017. In addition to these life sentences, he received 30 years for assault and 30 years for kidnapping. However, the fact that Todd pleaded guilty without a trial left many, including the victims' families, feeling that justice had not been fully served. The case also outraged the general public, who felt that the long wait for justice was unfair. Seventh Circuit Solicitor Barry Barnett expressed the frustration felt by many, stating that families should not have to wait years for justice. However, for Melissa, the wife of victim Scott Ponder, the sentencing brought a sense of relief and closure. She and other family members of the victims came together to hold a vigil in memory of their loved ones. After 13 years of pain and suffering, the victims' families finally had the answers they had been seeking about what had happened to their loved ones. In an interview, Melissa expressed her skepticism about Todd's motive for the murders, stating that she did not believe that her husband would have behaved in a way that would have provoked Todd. She recalled the kindness and good humor of Scott and another victim, Brian, and found it hard to believe that Todd's claims about their behavior were true. While Melissa was grateful that justice had been served, she felt that Todd's lack of remorse and casual demeanor during the investigation and court proceedings were disturbing. Many members of the public felt that Todd's crimes were so heinous that he deserved the death penalty. Todd's actions were heinous, and his lack of remorse is shocking. During the interrogation, he spoke about the murders in a casual, matter-of-fact way, as if recalling a past memory. This was truly despicable. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Susan Reinert. Susan Reinert, known to many as Sue, was born in 1943 in the town of Ridgeway, northwestern Pennsylvania. Her parents, William and Jane Gallagher, were a significant influence on her early life. Her father managed a newspaper, while her mother was a dedicated school teacher, which later shaped her path. As a child, Susan demonstrated a clear passion for learning and a natural love for literature, following in her mother's footsteps. She pursued higher education at Grove City College, where she met Kenneth Reinert, a young Air Force enlistee. Their chance encounter blossomed into a romance as they studied together. Susan's determination paid off as she earned her bachelor's degree. After achieving her initial goal, Susan pursued further education, earning a master's degree in English from Pennsylvania State University in 1966. She had married Kenneth in 1965, shortly after graduating from Grove City College, and they began a life filled with adventure as a military couple, moving to various duty stations across the country. Their military life took them to different parts of the country, including Sacramento, California, Rome, New York, and even Puerto Rico, before they eventually settled in the Philadelphia region. However, in 1971, Susan and Kenneth decided to separate, marking the end of their marriage. Despite the divorce, they parted ways amicably, without any legal disputes. As a single mother, Susan focused on creating a warm and loving home for her two children, Karen and Michael. She was a dedicated teacher and a beloved colleague and educator at Chestnut Walled Elementary School, known for her friendly and warm nature. Outside of her professional life, Susan was actively involved in Parents Without Partners, playing a crucial role in the Valley Forge chapter. After her mother's death, Susan found comfort in her connection with the organization Parents Without Partners. Despite facing challenges, she remained strong, relying on the organization for support. As she navigated her grief and a significant inheritance, her life became increasingly complex. However, she seemed to be managing well thanks to her strong ability to cope and a supportive network. On the evening of June 22, 1979, Susan and her two children spent what would be their last day together. Earlier that day, her son Michael had spent time with his father Kenneth, a personnel officer at Fidelity Bank. They had played in a father-son softball game, but left early when Susan arrived to pick Michael up around 8:30 p.m. Later that evening, Michael called his father to apologize for leaving the game early. Susan also called her former in-laws, Florence and John Reinhardt, with whom she remained close despite her divorce. With a full tank of gas, Susan was prepared for the drive to Allentown, Pennsylvania, about an hour north. She planned to attend a Parents Without Partners conference and use the trip as a weekend getaway with her children. Susan had planned a weekend getaway with her two children, Karen, 11 years old, and Michael, 10 years old. They were supposed to leave on Saturday morning to attend events, but on Friday evening, around 9 p.m., they unexpectedly departed. The children had been outside collecting hailstones from a summer storm, and shortly after, neighbors heard Susan's car start up and saw it leave the driveway. Susan had been having an affair with William Bradfield, a fellow teacher, which had put a strain on her marriage to Kenneth. Rumors had circulated that Susan and Bradfield might get married. On June 22, 1979, Susan visited her boyfriend before embarking on a trip with her children to Allentown, about 49 miles north. They had planned to spend the night in a motel, but instead of arriving at their destination, Susan and her children vanished. 2 days after Susan Reinhardt and her children vanished, the community cared for them deeply was overcome with concern and uncertainty. On June 25, 1979, their fears were realized when Susan's orange Plymouth hatchback was found in the Hostin Hotel parking lot in Harrisburg, 87 miles from Allentown and 97 miles from her home. Tragically, her body was discovered in the back of the vehicle. The details of her death were horrific. Susan's body was found nude, battered, and bound in chains, curled up in the wheel well of her car. Her hands were tied, and she had 2 black eyes. It appeared that she had been either beaten with chains or tied so tightly that the chains had caused severe bruising on her back. To make matters worse, she had been given a lethal dose of morphine. The disappearance of her 2 children remained a mystery, however, with no signs of their whereabouts. Police were left searching for answers, with the children seemingly vanished into thin air. The police searched for hours, hoping to find Susan's children with a babysitter, but none of her regular sitters, friends, or family members had seen them that weekend. As a result, the police began investigating to find answers. To gather leads, the police published pictures of the Reinert family in newspapers for weeks. This was before the internet and Amber Alerts existed, making it more challenging to disseminate information quickly. As the investigation continued, it was discovered that Susan Reinert had named William Bradfield, the man she believed she would marry, as the beneficiary of life insurance policies worth $730,000. This revelation raised suspicions that the children might have been killed to allow Bradfield to receive the substantial financial windfall. However, Bradfield had a solid alibi, as he was at the beach in Cape May, New Jersey, during the weekend when Susan was killed and her children disappeared. Several other teachers were with him and could vouch for his whereabouts. The police then shifted their focus to Upper Marin High School, where Susan worked. The school was facing several difficulties and challenges. The principal, J.C. Smith, had been involved in a scandal. He had been fired the previous year, being arrested at a local shopping center, where a search of his Ford Granada revealed loaded handguns, a hooded mask, and various tools associated with burglary. Additionally, a syringe filled with morphine was found in his trunk. Jay's life was already unraveling before his wife's cancer diagnosis. In 1977, his wife was diagnosed with an aggressive form of cancer, which she would eventually succumb to in August 1979. During her illness, she kept a diary, documenting her husband's increasingly bizarre behavior. Jay had begun engaging in consensual non-monogamous activities, including group sex and partner swapping, to which his wife strongly objected. This behavior seemed to be a precursor to even more alarming actions. Around the same time, their daughter, Stephanie, moved back in with her parents, bringing her husband Edward Hunsberger with her. The family was already dealing with the uncertainty of her mother's cancer battle, and tensions were running high among them. Edward Hunsberger and his wife Stephanie, Jay's daughter and son-in-law, struggled with heroin addiction and had trouble finding steady employment in the years leading up to their move. In an effort to escape their struggles with addiction, they moved back in with Jay family in early 1978. However, just a few months after the move, Stephanie and Edward mysteriously vanished. The last confirmed sighting of they was in February 1978, when they visited Edward's parents in North Wales, Pennsylvania. Before leaving, they mentioned that they would return to visit soon. However, after this point, all contact with them ceased. Edward failed to appear at a scheduled meeting with his probation officer later that month, prompting authorities to begin searching for him and Stephanie. When investigators reached out to Jay for information, he claimed that they had left for California to escape debts owed to local drug dealers. Despite his assertions, Jay was unable to provide any further details about their disappearance. Edward and Stephanie had been constantly on the move, traveling from place to place and never staying in one location for too long, making it easy for them to disappear without anyone noticing. Meanwhile, Jay was arrested for theft, and a search of his home uncovered some disturbing items. Authorities found firearms, marijuana, prescription pills, security guard uniforms and badges, as well as disturbing pornography. They also discovered nitric acid and stolen office equipment from a local school. Jay was linked to a string of recent armed robberies matching his description and attire. While awaiting sentencing for the theft charge, Jay's alibi witness, Bradfield, testified that they were on vacation during the time of the robberies. However, the jury did not find Bradfield's testimony credible. Jay had a notorious reputation at Upper Merion, earning him the nickname, the Prince of Darkness. This was especially relevant in the investigation of Susan's death, which was caused by strangulation or suffocation. The time frame for her death was broad, and when questioned about his whereabouts, Jay couldn't provide a clear answer. The autopsy found that Susan's body had an extremely high amount of morphine, roughly 10 times the amount needed to be fatal, which indicates that her overdose was likely a deliberate act. As the investigation into Susan's death continued, Jay was found guilty of a series of store robberies in the late 1970s. He was sentenced to 2 to 5 years in prison on June 25, 1979. However, even behind bars, Jay remained a key suspect in the investigation into Susan's death. The police began to dig deeper into his past, uncovering a disturbing discovery. Jay's daughter and son-in-law had gone missing in similar circumstances to Susan and her children. There were two main connections between Jay and the disappearances. Firstly, large quantities of morphine had been discovered in Jay's house a few months earlier. Secondly, a plastic comb with Jay's military unit was found in Susan's car. The disappearances of Jay's daughter and son-in-law shared striking similarities with the disappearance of Susan's children. The investigation revealed a shocking series of events that had a lasting impact on the public. However, the most shocking revelation was yet to come. In late July 1979, about a month after Susan's body was discovered near Harrisburg, investigators stumbled upon a potential motive for the crime. In her official documents, Susan referred to Bradfield as her future husband. As the police investigated further, they determined that Susan's death occurred between midnight on Saturday, June 23, 1979, and midnight on Sunday, June 24. Bradfield and his colleagues arrived in Cape Cod at 5 a.m. on Saturday and stayed until Monday afternoon, June 25. However, there was a gap in Bradfield's alibi, as his exact whereabouts during the time of Susan's disappearance were unclear. Investigations also revealed that Susan had withdrawn large sums of money from her accounts, totaling around $25,000. She had told bank employees that she planned to invest the money in high-yielding investments managed by Bradfield, whom she trusted as her future husband. Unbeknownst to Susan, Bradfield was leading a double life, dating multiple women, including a fellow English teacher, with whom he had a secret relationship spanning nearly a decade. Bradfield had promised Susan that he would handle her investments and assured her they would be profitable, providing a way for they to fund their upcoming wedding and move to England. However, investigators found fake stocks and bonds in Susan's home, which were actually forgeries created by Bradfield. He had sold these worthless securities to Susan, using fictional companies to make them appear legitimate. This discovery added a new dimension to the narrative, revealing a significant financial motive. Bradfield was required to testify in a lawsuit in March 1980 but initially refused to answer questions, referring them to his lawyers instead. His lawyers denied any wrongdoing but were open to negotiating a settlement to resolve the matter and distribute Susan's estate, which was worth approximately $7 million. In June 1980, Bradfield testified in a civil trial, downplaying his involvement in the case. He contradicted Susan's claims about their relationship, saying it was not as serious as she had told others. He denied plans to marry Susan later that year, despite her having shared these plans with multiple people. Bradfield also made an unsubstantiated claim that Susan had an affair with Jay Smith, the former principal of her high school, but this accusation was not supported by any evidence. Friends and family members remembered Susan being in a long-term relationship with Bradfield, with no indication of a relationship with Jay Smith, who was actually in prison at the time of the trial. Bradfield failed to explain why Susan had named him the beneficiary of her $1 million estate. Instead, he portrayed Susan as an irresponsible person who frequently got into trouble, and he blamed her for her problems, claiming he was only trying to help her deal with the consequences. As the investigation into the missing $25,000 continued, Susan's brother and ex-husband filed a second lawsuit in June 1980 to claim the $450,000 life insurance policy taken out on Susan's life just before her death. The goal was to use the funds to conduct a private investigation. However, the case took a surprising turn when Bradfield was arrested on February 20, 1981, and charged with 2 counts of theft and 1 count of conspiracy related to the $25,000. Wendy Ziegler, a former student of Bradfield's, was also charged as a co-conspirator in the case. Bradfield was released on bail on February 23, 1981, and was set to go on trial the following month. However, the trial was preempted when the original civil lawsuit was settled out of court. As a result of the settlement, $36,000 from Susan's estate was set aside to cover the costs of further investigations into the disappearance of the children and to contest certain provisions of Susan's will. Bradfield's 5-day trial ended on August 3, 1981, with a guilty verdict for theft. The prosecutor, Edward Weiss, requested that Bradfield's bond be increased from $25,000 to $75,000 due to concerns that the conviction would increase the risk of him fleeing, particularly in light of potential murder charges. Judge Robert A. Wright granted this request. On April 6, 1983, Pennsylvania state troopers arrested Bradfield and charged him with multiple crimes, including 3 counts of murder, conspiracy to commit murder, kidnapping, and obstructing the law. A grand jury found evidence that Bradfield was aware of the plot to kill Susan and her children and had likely participated in these crimes. Although J.C. Smith, a suspected accomplice, was not charged at that time, a confession from a fellow inmate, Proctor Knoll, implicated Bradfield. Knoll stated that while playing chess with Bradfield in prison, Bradfield revealed his involvement in the murders. Despite the lack of direct physical evidence linking Bradfield to the crimes, prosecutors felt they had a strong case against him. A previous conviction for theft also bolstered their confidence, as did a potential connection to a person who may have disposed of the victims' bodies, which further implicated Bradfield in the murders that occurred in the 1980s. J.C. Smith was forced to testify before a grand jury in 1984, despite invoking his Fifth Amendment right. The questioning was likely related to the disappearance of his daughter, Stephanie, and her husband, Edward Huntsberger. Around the same time, William Bradfield was also called to testify, but the details of his statements were not made public. In April 1985, J.C. Smith was asked to provide handwriting samples that may have been linked to documents written years earlier, possibly outlining a plan to murder Susan Weinert. This led to Jay's arrest on June 25, 1985, exactly 6 years after Susan's body was found. He was charged with 3 counts of first-degree murder and taken into custody. While Jay awaited trial, a book about the case was published by crime author Joseph Wambaugh in 1984, suggesting that Smith was the killer. The book was later adapted into a TV miniseries, drawing national attention to the case. Despite this, Jay maintained his innocence from prison, filing appeals and claiming that William Bradfield had framed him. In 1989, the court decided to re-examine Jay's case and discovered problems with the prosecution's handling of the case. This led to a new trial in 1990. Jay waived his right to a speedy trial to allow for a thorough investigation. By 1992, the Pennsylvania Supreme Court ruled in Jay's favor, overturning his murder conviction due to issues with the prosecution's conduct. For 20 years, the state did not pursue a new trial against J.C. Smith, allowing him to live the rest of his life without further prosecution. Meanwhile, William Bradfield continuously disregarded court orders and refused to pay the $25,000 he owed to the estate of Susan Weinert. This issue was finally resolved in a settlement in 1996. J.C. Smith went on to file lawsuits against the state and Joseph Wambaugh, claiming defamation and conspiracy. However, both suits were eventually dismissed. On January 16, 1998, William Bradfield, who had been in prison for over a decade, was found unresponsive in his cell and pronounced dead due to cardiac arrest. Kenneth Reinert, the ex-husband of Susan Weinert, passed away in June 2002 without ever knowing what happened to their 2 missing children. J.C. Smith, whose conviction was overturned in 1992, wrote books about the case and remarried in 2002. He died on May 12, 2009, leaving many questions about his involvement in the 1978 disappearance of his daughter and son-in-law, Stephanie and Edward Huntsberger, still unanswered. Welcome back, mystery lovers. Today's case is going to keep you on the edge of your seat, the case of Laura Wallin. Laura Wallin was born on February 10, 1986, to parents Mark and Gwen Wallin. She grew up in Olney, Maryland, alongside her older sister Jennifer, with whom she had a very close relationship. Laura's passion was in helping others, which led her to pursue a career as a social science teacher. The investigation into her disappearance began on September 5, 2017. It was led by Montgomery County Police Chief Tom Manger. He worked alongside Laura's family and friends, as well as her students. A group of more than 20 people, led by Saquon Maxwell, a former student of Laura's, came together to spread the word about Laura's disappearance by distributing flyers throughout the neighborhood and school district. Police officers searched Laura's neighborhood, asking residents questions and keeping a close eye on the area between Howard and Montgomery County. Laura's father, Mark, made a public plea for anyone with information to come forward and help find his daughter. He wanted Laura to know they were doing everything they could to find her and they weren't going to give up. Losing a child is one of the most difficult experiences a parent can face, and Mark wanted his daughter to know that they were working hard to bring her home safely. On the evening of September 7, 2017, an employee at the Jersey Gated Complex in Columbia, Maryland, found a new clue. While rummaging through a dumpster, he found Laura's license inside a cell phone. When police arrived, they also found Laura's vehicle parked at the complex. What puzzled them was that the complex was located just across the highway from Wild Lake High School, where Laura worked. This raised questions about why Laura would have parked her car there. Police took the evidence they collected to the lab for further testing. They also looked deeper into Laura's past and spoke to people close to her. To cover more ground, the investigation team divided into two groups. One group focused on tracking Laura's online activities, while the other group interviewed her family members and her boyfriend. To gather evidence, the police searched Laura's computer and cell phone. They also thoroughly searched her car for any clues that might point to her disappearance. In addition, they carefully reviewed her financial transactions and cell phone records. As part of their inquiry, the police also spoke with Laura's parents and sister about her disappearance. Laura's father, Mark, told them that the family had planned a weekend trip together, but Laura decided to stay behind to spend time with her boyfriend, Tyler. This was confirmed by her sister, Jennifer, who told police that Laura was expecting Tyler to propose to her during their time together. Police also obtained a text message conversation between Jennifer and Laura from the same weekend. Jennifer received messages from Laura stating that she and Tyler had plans for a countryside adventure on Saturday, September 2, 2017. Mark mentioned that Tyler had expressed his intention to marry Laura after learning of her pregnancy. However, on Monday morning, September 4, 2017, Laura sent Jennifer a concerning text message claiming the baby was not Tyler's, but rather her ex-boyfriend Antoine's. Jennifer found this suspicious, as Laura hadn't seen Antoine in over 2 years. She also noted that Laura had misspelled Antoine's name. When Jennifer tried to contact Laura, she received no response. Upon returning home on Monday evening, the family discovered that Laura was missing, leaving behind burning candles and her pet dog locked inside. The family suggested questioning Tyler, as he was the last person to see Laura. Tyler spoke with police and shared details of his weekend with Laura. He explained that he took her to Damascus, Maryland, to view a property he was interested in buying, as a home for their future family. Laura seems excited about the idea of starting a family in the countryside. However, when they returned to Olney the following day, Sunday, September 3, 2017, the atmosphere had changed. According to Tyler, Laura was not as happy as she had been the day before. He revealed that they had an argument in Damascus, but he declined to elaborate on the disagreement. Tyler told police that when they returned to Laura's house, she asked him to return his set of keys. He agreed, not wanting to upset her further due to her pregnancy. They had planned to meet at the Columbia Mall on the morning of Monday, September 4, 2017, for breakfast and to discuss their issues, but Laura did not show up. When Tyler visited her house, there was no sign of her. Tyler initially told the police that he was unable to enter Laura's home because he didn't have a key. However, this statement was false. The neighbors reported seeing Tyler walking Laura's dog on Monday, September 4, at 2:30 p.m., which directly contradicted Tyler's claim. This raised a question for the police. If Tyler didn't have a key, how was he able to enter the home to take the dog for a walk? As police dug deeper, their suspicions about Tyler grew. They asked for and received permission to review his phone records. They also secretly placed a tracking device on his vehicle to monitor his movements. During this time, the police continued to search for Laura, fearing the worst but they hoping for the best and that she would return safely. The investigation uncovered some crucial information. A debit card transaction on September 2, 2017, revealed that Laura had made a purchase at a Safeway store. Surveillance footage confirmed that Tyler and Laura were together that evening. Analysis of their phone records showed that both their phones were in the same locations from that Saturday evening, but on Sunday, Laura's phone suddenly stopped moving. This finding, combined with the tracking device revealing Tyler's frequent visits to a field in Damascus, continues to imply Tyler is involved in Laura's disappearance. Tyler's phone records showed that he had texted a friend on Sunday evening, asking for a ride to help clean up a mess, but the friend declined. Further investigation revealed that both Tyler's and Laura's fingerprints were found on her vehicle, cell phone, and license, which were discovered in a dumpster in Columbia. This new evidence led police to bring Tyler in for additional questioning. Police asked Tyler about his involvement with Laura's cell phone and the presence of his fingerprints on her belongings. They also inquired about the cryptic message he had sent to his friend. In response, Tyler changed his story. He claimed that Laura was in trouble because she was pregnant by someone else, not him. He alleged that Laura had an affair with a student, which resulted in her pregnancy. Tyler's statement to the police was startling. He explained that he had taken Laura's car, license, and phone, and discarded them at the complex, an attempt to give her a head start to escape her problems before her family found out. His intention, he claimed, was to buy her some time to sort out her issues. He acknowledged trying to mislead everyone, including the police, in order to protect her because he cared about her. However, when police asked Tyler about Laura's current location, he denied knowing where she is now. But the police were not convinced by his story. Unbeknownst to Tyler, investigators had already discovered other messages on his phone, which painted a different picture of his relationship with Laura. A closer look at his phone revealed, they discover that Tyler has been texting with other women. It turns out Laura isn't his only girlfriend. As the police dug deeper, they discovered that Tyler and Laura had a troubled 10-year relationship. This new information was sparked from Laura's father, Mark, who had always felt uneasy about Tyler. According to Mark, Tyler had never made an effort to be with Laura on important occasions, such as holidays and birthdays, which made him question Tyler's commitment to his daughter. What's more, Mark knew that Tyler was also dating another woman, Christina Wagner, who was a teacher like Laura. Further investigation led the police to friends of both Tyler and Christina. They revealed that Tyler had been leading a double life. It turned out that Tyler had met Christina in 2012 and had been living with her while still in a relationship with Laura. Friends of they told police that Christina and Tyler had gotten engaged and were planning to get married in 2018. When asked about Laura, Tyler's friends claimed that she had become aggressive and that Tyler was trying to distance himself from her. Police found text messages on Laura's phone that showed she had tried to contact Christina on August 28, 2017. In the messages, Laura expressed her desire to meet Christina to talk about Tyler. Friends claimed Christina was angry at Laura's bold actions and Christina confronted Tyler about it. Christina decided to file a police complaint. However, when police told Christina, Laura, and Tyler would have to go to court to get a restraining order, Tyler changed his mind and withdrew. Investigation revealed that Christina and Tyler had planned to spend the Labor Day weekend shopping for their wedding, but Tyler couldn't make it due to a knee injury. When police told Laura's family about Christina, they shared with officers what Laura had confided in them, that Tyler was being stalked by Christina. This new information made it more likely that Tyler could be a suspect in Laura's disappearance. Police brought Tyler in for questioning again, this time confronting him about Christina. Initially, he denied any involvement with her, but police were able to challenge his claim with evidence of his secret life. Eventually, Tyler admitted to cheating on both women, which had led to his fight with Laura. When investigators spoke with Tyler, he expressed his desire to mend his relationship with Laura. However, when asked about Laura's disappearance, he maintained that he was not involved. Unbeknownst to Tyler, the police discovered a connection between him and a vacant field in Damascus through his phone records. They found a link to a meat processing plant called KS Cuts, which was adjacent to the property that Tyler had visited with Laura. The plant's owner also owned the field they had visited. Interviews with the owner revealed that Tyler had previously worked for him and often helped him hunt on the property. Further questioning led to a disturbing discovery. Over the Labor Day weekend, Tyler had requested access to the safe on the owner's property, which contained 4.20 caliber rifles with ammunition. This new information led police to suspect that Laura may have been killed, but they could not confront Tyler yet. They still needed to find Laura and gather evidence to prove their suspicions correct. Laura's family, along with the police, devised a plan to try to get Tyler to reveal Laura's location. On September 11, 2017, Tyler joined Laura's parents, Mark and Gwen, at a press conference to appeal for Laura's safe return. However, this plan was set up as a trap. The police and Laura's family were hoping Tyler would make a mistake and reveal information about Laura's whereabouts. Meanwhile, police officers and cadaver dogs searched the fields near the meat processing plant in Damascus. During the press conference, Tyler made an emotional appeal for Laura's safe return. In his speech, he hinted that Laura shouldn't be ashamed of anything she'd done wrong. Tyler's speech included the following words: "Laura, if you're listening, it doesn't matter what happened. It doesn't matter what trouble you're in. We're going to fix it together, you, me, and your family. There are so many people who miss you, who are looking for you, and who are praying for your safety. We don't sleep or eat, we just pray that you're safe. I ask you to let us know that you're safe." Tyler claimed to be worried about Laura's disappearance, but what he didn't know was that he was the main suspect in the case. At the time, he seemed genuinely concerned, saying he was doing everything he could to find Laura and praying for her safe return. However, the situation took a devastating turn on September 13, 2017, just 2 days after the press conference. A secluded area of a field was identified as the location of Laura Wallen's body after K9 dogs detected something suspicious. Upon further investigation, detectives discovered a freshly dug grave and recovered Laura's body at 5:30 p.m. The police were able to identify the body by matching the clothes Laura was wearing to a picture Jennifer had shown them from her last conversation with Laura. The discovery marked a tragic end to the desperate search for Laura. Laura Wallen, a highly respected teacher at Wild Lake High School and recent Teacher of the Year, tragically passed. The incident occurred around noon. Unfortunately, her unborn child also did not survive. The same day, Tyler Tessier, Laura's boyfriend, was arrested and charged with her murder. Tyler held at the county jail while investigators awaited the initial autopsy report. The report confirmed that Laura had been shot in the back of the head before being buried in the field. When Tyler was confronted with evidence, he created a false story. He claimed that on Sunday evening, he and Laura were at her house when a group of African-American men burst in, took them hostage at gunpoint, and drove them to Damascus. According to Tyler, the men spared his life but shot Laura in the head, forcing him to bury her in a field. They threatened to harm him if he revealed their identities or led the police to Laura's body. However, police did not believe this story because they knew the relationship between Tyler and the property owner. Tyler then changed his story, claiming that he and Laura had an argument, which ended with him pushing her, causing her to fall, hit her head. He assumed she had died and buried her in the field to hide her body. Later, Tyler claimed that he had reconsidered and thought Laura might still be alive. To end her suffering, he dug up the grave, shot her in the head, and covered his tracks. He described this as a mercy killing. Tyler was held without bail at the Montgomery County Detention Center. Laura and her unborn son, baby Reed, were laid to rest in a public cemetery on September 30, 2017. Over 1,000 people, including Laura's family, friends, and students, attended the funeral to pay their respects to the beloved teacher. The prosecution, led by Montgomery County State Attorney John McCarthy, was building its case against Tyler. As they investigated, they developed a theory about Tyler's double life. They believed that Tyler was willing to continue living a secret life until Laura discovered his relationship with Christina. Fearing his deception would be exposed, Tyler began planning to kill Laura so he could continue his life with Christina. Tyler saw Labor Day weekend as the perfect opportunity to carry out his plan. With Christina out of town and Laura's family away, no one would be able to ask him about Laura's whereabouts until the weekend was over, giving him time to come up with an alibi. He chose a location he was familiar with, where he knew he could access the necessary equipment through a friend. The area was also isolated, making it unlikely that anyone would think to look for Laura there. Tyler fabricated a story about Laura's infidelity to throw her family and investigators off his trail. He deliberately left her car and belongings near her workplace, tried to create false evidence that she had run away because of a scandalous affair. However, Tyler made critical mistakes, constantly changing his alibi, which raised suspicions among the police from the start. Moreover, Tyler underestimated Laura's family, who had noticed that his relationship with Laura was unusual from the beginning. They felt that he never had the responsibility to her as a real-life partner. The prosecution had built a strong case against Tyler, presenting a convincing argument. However, Maryland law only allowed Tyler to be charged with Laura's murder. The death of her unborn child was not considered a separate crime under Maryland law, and this decision would be disputed during Tyler's trial in September 2018. On September 6, 2018, the pursuit of justice for Laura Wallen and her unborn son, baby Reed, came to an abrupt end. Tyler Tessier, the individual responsible for their deaths, was found hanging in his jail cell around 5 a.m. He had been allowed to shower and have breakfast before taking his own life. The news was a devastating blow to Laura's family, who had been seeking justice for their loved ones. They remembered Laura as a bright and loving person. According to reports, Tyler had written 5 letters indicating that he had planned to take his own life for some time. Laura's family did not get to see Tyler brought to justice. Laura's mother, when described Tyler as a diabolical human and expressed relief that her family no longer had to worry about him being a part of their society. The case of Laura's murder is a tragedy that will leave many people questioning the nature of evil. It's heartbreaking that Laura and her unborn child were killed by the man she loved and trusted, who had promised her a happy future together. This case serves as a reminder that sometimes the people we trust the most can be the ones who harm us the most. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Shad Therian. Shad Therian was born on September 7, 1997, in Green Bay, Wisconsin, to parents Tara Pinich and Michael Therian. His parents later separated, and his mother started dating a man named Steve. Shad Therian grew up in a loving family that included his parents, two sisters, Ava and Svea, a brother, Bo Smith, and his younger sibling, Therian. He was also surrounded by a large, close-knit family that included paternal and maternal grandparents, as well as many aunts, uncles, nieces, nephews, and cousins. Additionally, Shad Therian had many friends who were like a second family to him. As a child, Shad attended Howard and SWO schools. However, he later decided to help out with the family business, working alongside his father and grandfather. Shad was a lively and adventurous person who enjoyed activities such as camping, gaming, and spending quality time with loved ones. Shad was a talented and artistic person who loved carving wood. He was also kind and compassionate, often putting others' interests before his own. His empathetic nature made him a loving family member. However, what happened to him is all the more tragic because of his good character. On the evening of February 23, 2022, Shad told his family that he was going out to meet two friends. They planned to hang out for the night, and his parents bid him goodbye around 9:30 p.m. At the time, no one knew the danger he was about to face. Shad's mother, Tara, had gone out for a while and returned a couple of hours later. She then went upstairs to sleep, unaware that her son had returned home with his friend Taylor and was in the basement. Several hours after midnight, Tara was awoken by the sound of the front door slamming shut as Taylor left. This startled her, and she came downstairs. Tara called out to her son, but when he didn't answer, she went down to the basement to look for him. As she entered the basement, she noticed a bucket with a rag covering it, and she removed the rag, revealing a horrific sight. Her son's severed head was inside the bucket. Panicked, she immediately called 911. "My son's head is in a bucket in my basement," she told the operator. When the operator asked her to confirm what she had seen, she replied, "I looked in a bucket and saw my son's head." When police officers arrived at her residence on Stony Brook Lane in Green Bay, Wisconsin, they secured the entire house before entering the basement. There, they were met with a gruesome scene that left them shocked. They knew they had to find the person responsible for the savage crime, as they posed a potential threat to society as a whole. During their investigation, detectives made a disturbing discovery in a bucket: Shad's severed genitalia and head. They then analyzed Shad's phone records and found that on the evening of February 23rd, he had agreed to meet his friends Taylor and Alexander. At around 9:30 p.m. Taylor picked up Shad to hang out at her apartment. According to Shad's mother, Tara, police questioned Taylor and Alexander at their homes. Taylor was living with her friend Scott Thomas at his house. At Taylor's residence, detectives found bloody footprints near her minivan leading up to her apartment. The investigators took Taylor to the station for additional questioning despite having already been charged with a horrific crime, beheading her ex-partner. A bizarre scene unfolded in the interrogation room as Taylor appeared unconcerned by the situation and instead focused on complaining about the room's cleanliness. As she sat, gazing at the camera, it became evident that she showed no signs of remorse or guilt over what she had done to Shad Therian. The detective got straight to the point and asked her how she knew Shad. Taylor replied that he was her ex-boyfriend. She also admitted that she had met with Shad on February 23 in her apartment, where Scott was also present. Additionally, she confirmed that the minivan belonged to Scott. When questioned about the activities she, Shad, and Alexander did that night, Taylor readily confessed that they had smoked weed together. She explained that she was giving Shad a haircut while they smoked. However, after a while, Alexander decided to head home, citing the late hour. After Alexander left, Taylor and Shad decided to go to Shad's house, where he told her that his mother and her boyfriend would be coming home late. They went to Shad's house, where they used ice and also injected trazodone, a medication Taylor had stolen from her friend Scott. This revelation suggested that Taylor struggled with substance abuse, adding another layer of complexity to the case. During the interrogation, the detective realized that Taylor was under the influence of drugs, but continued questioning her anyway. Taylor told Detective Graff that Shad's body was still in the basement. When the detective asked for more details about what happened to Shad, Taylor claimed she couldn't remember, saying she had blacked out after smoking and drinking for a while. During the interrogation, Taylor initially attempted to deceive the detectives but soon realized her tactics were ineffective. She eventually confessed to being intimate with Shad on the night in question, revealing that their encounter involved various props, including a choke collar. As the questioning continued, Taylor acknowledged that she took pleasure in strangling Shad, and that he also enjoyed it. This behavior exposed her sadistic and violent tendencies. When asked about her preferences, Taylor clarified that she enjoyed being the one doing the strangling, rather than being on the receiving end. She also admitted to having a history of engaging in this behavior. When questioned about the whereabouts of the remaining body parts, Taylor expressed regret for not bringing Shad's head with her. However, this regret was not driven by remorse for her actions, but rather frustration with her own mistake, which ultimately led the police to her. The detective was surprised by her straightforward answers, which detailed the dismemberment of Shad's body. Taylor explained that some body parts were in the van, while others were in the basement. What was more astonishing was her lack of remorse after committing such a heinous crime. The conversation then shifted to the whereabouts of the body parts and organs. Taylor explained that they were all in a black bag. The detective wondered if they would need to take the head to a separate location, to which Taylor replied that it would be difficult to dispose of all the organs. The detective suspected Taylor's behavior was indicative of a disturbed psyche or mental health condition, hindering her emotional response to the crime. Alternatively, she might have been under the influence of drugs, triggering her to act on intrusive thoughts. During the interrogation, Taylor giggled and laughed while providing details of the crime, displaying a disturbing nonchalance. She casually admitted to dismembering her ex-lover with kitchen knives and not disposing of the body parts due to laziness. Her lack of emotion and calm demeanor raised doubts about her mental health and whether she had planned the harm. Taylor denied any intention, but her response lacked remorse. Taylor described how she strangled Shad with chains, admitting that she enjoyed the process and didn't stop even when Shad struggled. This behavior showcases her cruel and sadistic nature. During the interrogation, Taylor shocked the detectives by revealing that Taylor continued to engage in sex with Shad's body after discovering he had passed away. Taylor made a disturbing statement, claiming that when she loved something or someone too much, Taylor felt an overwhelming urge to kill it and lost control. This suggests that Taylor was fully aware of her actions when she dismembered Shad, as the incident occurred immediately after they had been intimate. Taylor openly discussed her disturbing actions after killing Shad, revealing a shocking disregard for human life. Taylor admitted to playing with his body for 2 to 3 hours after his death, demonstrating necrophiliac tendencies. Taylor also expressed regret over not taking any drugs after the incident, knowing it would have calmed her down. During the dismemberment and cleanup process, she became frustrated, but later claimed to have enjoyed it. Taylor explained that she was in a state of panic after the incident and didn't know how to react. She considered calling the police or an ambulance but didn't. When questioned by Detective David about her decision, Taylor expressed regret over her actions. She acknowledged that she had thought about seeking help but was overwhelmed by her emotions. In a later interrogation, Taylor provided a detailed and graphic account of how she dismembered the victim's body. Taylor pulled him over, his head hanging off the bed, near the tub. After I cut his head off, Taylor moved the tub underneath. Taylor explains the sequence. I beheaded the body, blood spilled into a pail, and the head fell in. I poured the contents into a blue Tupperware, finished cutting the head, and placed it in a container. The internal organs are in the Tupperware were scattered around, some in separate plastic bags. I put the bagged organs in a backpack, leaving the blood in the blue tub. Taylor Shaw Business was born in Avon, Illinois in November 1997 to Maria and Arturo Coronado. When she was in 4th grade, her family relocated to Wisconsin. Later, she married Warren Shaw Business and had a son, Matto, with him. Despite this, she reconnected with an ex-boyfriend, Shad Therian, and engaged in a relationship with him. After the heinous crime was committed, the authorities recognized that Taylor had significant mental health issues that required attention. However, they also determined that at the time of the crime, she was fully aware of her actions, which included the admission of enjoying the process of dismembering Shad's body. Taylor also confessed to using sex toys on his deceased body and engaging in other forms of physical intimacy with him. Taylor Shaw Business was arrested on February 23, 2022, for the murder and dismemberment of her ex-partner, Shad Therian. Her trial began on July 24, 2022. Due to the severity of the crime, the court needed to determine whether Taylor was sane at the time of the crime and if she understood that her actions were wrong. During the trial, Taylor's grandmother testified about Taylor's difficult childhood. She explained that Taylor's mother had passed away at a young age and her father had remarried. Taylor had also experienced the loss of her brother, Arturo Coronado Jr., in a motorcycle accident in 2021. Additionally, Taylor's husband, Warren Shaw Business, was already incarcerated for distributing methamphetamine and was also serving as Taylor's defender in court. The grandmother further revealed that Taylor's young son had been taken into custody by Child Protective Services just 24 hours after his birth. However, Taylor's grandmother and her husband were fighting to regain custody of their grandson, Matto. The grandmother attributed Taylor's turbulent upbringing to her struggles with depression and bipolar disorder. She emphasized that Taylor needed psychological help, but also deserved a second chance at life. Arturo Coronado, Taylor's 51-year-old father, was brought to the courtroom from prison, where he was serving time for assaulting a child. What was unsettling was Taylor's reaction to his presence. She couldn't stop smiling and giggling throughout his testimony. Despite her unusual behavior, her father provided a candid account of her upbringing. He acknowledged that Taylor had struggled in high school, which led him to send her to live with her grandparents in Texas, where she eventually graduated. He also revealed that Taylor had been admitted to a psychiatric center before the birth of her child, Matto, due to hallucinations and suicidal thoughts. According to her, Arturo Coronado, Taylor's life took a turn for the worse when she met her husband, who introduced her to drugs. When Alexander Gainan, a mutual friend of Taylor and Shad, took the stand to testify, Taylor continued to giggle and laugh throughout his statement. Alexander explained that he had known Taylor and Shad since their time at Bellevue Middle School, confirming that they had dated at the time. He also shared his account of the night of the murder, stating that he had been drinking with Taylor and others at her apartment, but left around 1 or 2 a.m. when it got late. Alexander added that he had attempted to contact Shad the following day, but received no response. At her next court appearance, Taylor was seen wearing a spit mask, typically used to prevent individuals from spitting on law enforcement or court staff. Valerie, Taylor's second cousin, and several distant relatives testified on her behalf, stating that while Taylor currently required psychological treatment, she deserved a second chance at life in the future. Kelly Therian criticized Taylor, saying her actions were cowardly and that her mental health issues shouldn't be a reason for parole. Assistant District Attorney Caleb Saunders concluded that Taylor's actions were not a result of her substance abuse or mental health issues, but rather a deliberate choice. He emphasized that her lack of remorse warrants the harsher sentence for such a heinous crime. Defense attorney Christopher Frolick argued Taylor deserves a second chance, despite committing a horrific crime. He called the murder an honest mistake, suggesting Taylor didn't intentionally commit the crime or take pleasure in it. Frolick claimed Taylor was intoxicated and not fully aware of her actions when speaking with detectives. When Taylor requested a possible extension of the trial, her outburst in court revealed that Taylor was not only struggling with substance abuse, but also had deeper issues that required immediate attention. The trial concluded on September 26, 2022, with Judge Thomas Walsh sentencing Taylor to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The case shocked the world due to the inhumane nature of the crime, in which Taylor dismembered her former lover, Shad Therian. What was even more disturbing was Taylor's apparent lack of remorse or guilt for the heinous crime she had committed.